Good afternoon, Councillor Dominato. I see you've joined the line. Could we do an audio test, please? This is Tina Penny speaking.
Hi, Tina. It's Lisa here.
Perfect. We can hear you well.
Great.
Thank you. Hello, this is Tina Penny from the Council Chamber. Muriel, if we could do that test one more time, please.
Hi, Muriel here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please just make sure you speak.
Brilliant.
Okay, directly into your microphone when you're speaking. Thank you.
Will do. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Councillor DeGenova, your chair for today. This is Tina Penny in the Council Chambers. Could we do a test, an audio test for you, please? Okay. Okay, we'll wait a few minutes. Good afternoon, Councillor Weeb. Tina Penny in the Council Chambers. Could we do an audio check, please?
Yes. How's everyone doing today?
We're doing well today. Thank you, and we can hear you well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Chair DeGenova, this is Tina Penny in the Council Chamber. Are you ready to do an audio test?
I think my audio might work now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. I could see everyone and I could talk, but I couldn't hear anything. My apologies. Okay, if you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm now ready to go then.
Yes, there is.
Just let me know when you're ready.
Okay, just let me double check quorum and I'll be right back to you.
Of course, thank you.
Councillor Kirby-Young, are you on the line? If we could do an audio check, please. This is Tina Penny in the chamber. Councillor Kirby-Young, are you there?
Hi, Tina. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear. Thank you. If people could mute their mics if they're not going to be speaking, we can hear some background noise. Thank you. Mayor Stewart, we see you on the video. Could we do an audio check, please? This is Tina Penny in the chamber.
Hi, Tina. Thanks very much. Here I am.
We can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Fry, I believe you're on the line now. If we could do a quick audio check.
Hi, Tina. Yep, I'm here and doing A-OK. Sounds clear to me.
And you sound great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor DeGenova, as chair of the meeting, I can advise you we are ready to proceed.
Great. Thanks, Tina. So now would be good?
Yes.
Great. Good afternoon. I call this meeting of the Council COVID Recovery Committee of Wednesday, June 17th, 2020 to order. This meeting is being convened by electronic means as authorized under the order of the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General of the Province of BC, or of British Columbia Emergency Program Act, Ministerial Order number M139. As such, Council members are participating by phone, and as chair of this meeting, I am also participating by phone. Please note, if my connection is lost during any portion of this meeting, we will recess the meeting until my connection is restored. If Council loses connection during the voting process, we have staff on hand to facilitate getting you back online quickly while we suspend the voting process. The contact information has been circulated to you. Council are also reminded that we need to ensure that there's quorum during this meeting, so make sure your video is enabled, please. The live stream of this meeting will continue with audio only. Presentations and vote results will be projected to viewers when available. The public is strongly urged to listen to the proceedings via the city's website and to follow along on Twitter at VanCityClerk for updates on the progress of this meeting. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working together with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. I also would just like to take a moment to recognize the immense contributions of the City of Vancouver staff who work hard every day to make our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Mayor Stewart.
Present.
Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor DeGenova is in the chair. Councillor Fry.
Here?
Councillor Swanson.
Here.
Councillor Hardwick.
Present.
Councillor Wiebe.
Present.
Councillor Boyle.
Present.
Councillor Dominato.
Present.
Councillor Bly.
Present.
Councillor Kirby-Young.
Present.
The meeting has quorum, Chair DeGenova.
Thanks very much. Council, we need a motion to go into Committee of the Whole.
So moved, Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. Do we have a seconder?
Second, Councillor Dominato.
I heard Councillor Dominato. Thanks, and we'll vote on this, Council. All in favor, please say yay.
Yay.
Yay. Yay.
Yay.
Those opposed say nay. And that passes unanimously. Before we move on to agenda items, I want to give preliminary notice that due to the volume of business to accomplish today, I anticipate we may need to extend the meeting by approximately 1 hour. As we near the 3 p.m. conclusion time, we can evaluate if this will be necessary, and given consideration, we can give consideration at the time as to whether or not we're going to extend that time, Council. And for the first agenda item that we have, and I should note that to continue on, we would need 2/3 affirmative vote to be able to continue. The first agenda item we have is a presentation, COVID-19 economic recovery and complete communities. And then, my apologies, Council. Just give me one moment. Just give me 1 second. I'm just going to check in to make sure I have some revisions here. Just want to check with the clerk, so just please give me a moment. Council. Just wanted to check in on that. So our first presentation is the COVID-19 economic recovery and complete communities. For the first agenda item, we have 7 presentations regarding COVID-19 economic recovery and complete communities by the guest speakers outlined on the agenda. I suggest we receive the presentations consecutively and follow that with questions and answers, and that each counselor have a total of 5 minutes for questions to all guest speakers. First, we have guest speaker Tom Conway, CEO of Small Business BC, who has a PowerPoint presentation, and is joined by Sarah Clark, the Vice President of Strategic Projects, for questions. And just a moment, I just wanted to confer with the clerk on something. Okay, thanks very much. Council, I understand that we do have Tom Conway and Sarah Clark here now. And I just asked to make sure that they are here. And I will hand it over to Mr. Conway and Ms. Clark.
Thank you very much. This is Tom Conway. I hope everybody can hear me okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm Tom Conway. I'm the CEO for Small Business BC, and as was noted, I'm here with Sarah Clark today. She's our VP of Strategic Projects. She'll be finishing our presentation about halfway through, but I will continue to click through the slides. I want to begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking today from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and I want to thank you to the mayor, councilors, and city staff for inviting us and helping us navigate the preparations for today's meeting. I also have to give a huge shout out to the rest of my Small Business BC team, without whom none of this great work would get done. A little about us. Prior to becoming an independent nonprofit society in 2002, Small Business BC was a part of government. Our mandate is to help BC entrepreneurs grow successful and sustainable businesses through expert business advisors, educational services, resources, and events. Our main sources of funding include the federal government through Western Economic Diversification under Minister Joe Lee, and the provincial government through Minister Mungal at the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Development, and Competitiveness for our core services, as well as for other projects and programs. We also receive corporate sponsorships and fee-for-service. Our board is governed by 10 members from throughout the province and currently chaired by Joyce Yip, who owns a fuel cell consultancy. We have a staff of about 40 individuals throughout the province, mostly located here in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland. Our community network is vast. We often partner with other municipal, provincial, and federal organizations such as the Vancouver Economic Commission, Community Futures, Futurepreneur, Chambers of Commerce, including the BC Chamber, and business improvement areas, including the Downtown Vancouver BIA and BC BIA and others. This next slide here is just a list of our current service offerings, and during this presentation, we'll be highlighting a few of them that are more relevant to our discussion today. And this slide highlights the concentration of businesses in our service area. Most businesses, of course, 65% of them are located here in the Lower Mainland. Sarah and I want to address the main questions that were asked of us, as well as touch on the more detailed questions that guide the committee's work with respect to COVID-19 and its impact on BC businesses and entrepreneurs. First, what is important to Small Business BC? We know that in BC, small business is big business. 97% of all businesses in the province are small businesses, and they employ 57% of the working population, truly the heart of our economy. As the premier resource center for small businesses in British Columbia, Small Business BC is facing unprecedented times in supporting entrepreneurs as they manage the economic challenges brought on by COVID-19 pandemic. Every day, we help hundreds of small business owners, including many who have closed their doors and are desperately looking for ways to create revenue to ensure their businesses can survive. New initiatives such as the BC Business COVID-19 Support Service and venues such as our webinars, digital meetups, and the Small Business Marketplace have been launched with the generous support of our federal and provincial governments in recent weeks in response to the global crisis. However, even with these initiatives, we continue to uncover unmet business needs. With the Premier's announcement on May 6th about the phased restart, we also have become a source of information in partnership with WorkSafe BC and the Provincial Health Officer on how businesses can restart safely for their customers and staff. The support service serves as a single point of contact for businesses throughout the province looking for information on supports and resources available during the COVID-19 pandemic. Inquiries to Small Business BC have more than doubled from the same time last year, serving more than 4,000 calls, emails, and chats, and over 150,000 page views on our COVID-19 content alone since the crisis began. The two topics of all inquiries are around guidance for accessing federal and provincial supports and restarting. Many of these calls continue to be around the rent relief and commercial evictions, which has caused a good deal of consternation for both small business owners and their landlords. What is important to us now is how we can best support those businesses who are able to reopen, as well as help those who are still struggling and or have been forced to close their business permanently. Like the City of Vancouver, we are intent on helping rebuild a more resilient and sustainable economy with a specific focus on small business and local jobs. Our Small Business BC Marketplace is a new initiative launched in response to COVID-19. So far, over 900 businesses featured across BC, including over 300 from Vancouver alone, and it grows every day, have been registered on the marketplace. Many businesses struggle to be found when competing with large multinational providers with free delivery. This marketplace emphasizes and supports local and regional promotion on a centralized platform, amplifying the marketing message for these businesses. In the coming weeks, the marketplace platform will evolve with new functionality, and we intend this tool to continue to expand even in a post-COVID world as a benefit to businesses and consumers alike. What are the key challenges? We are living in unprecedented times with a multitude of challenges presented around individuals, businesses, governments, nonprofits, and others doing everything they can to survive and sustain. In data gathered from inquiries to our own support center, as well as from a recent pulse survey conducted by the BC Chamber in partnership with the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade and the BC Business Council, only 26% of businesses feel prepared to restart and be able to operate profitably. 75% have challenges attracting customers and revenue. 30% are not prepared to meet safety guidelines. 43% believe they will require additional significant financial support beyond those already announced from government. And 31% have explored increasing their digital e-commerce presence, while 11% have pivoted their business entirely to a new model. I know that this committee also has several guiding principles, but let me touch on those that Small Business BC is working most closely on at the moment that can address both the challenges and the supports that will be most beneficial in response to your question. How can Small Business BC and the city best support economic recovery and complete communities? Small Business BC have been working on a few projects in parallel and with support of the City of Vancouver that we believe can best support economic recovery in our community. For this question and the remainder of our presentation, I'm going to hand over the audio to my colleague and VP of Special Projects, Sarah Clark.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to the City of Vancouver Mayor and Council for inviting us to participate today. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Fantastic. As we look forward towards economic recovery, let's first speak a little bit about some of the initiatives that SBBC and the City of Vancouver have had the opportunity to collaborate on in the last number of years. In early 2019, the city engaged Small Business BC on the redevelopment of the city's small business guides in response to what we understood at the time was some user feedback that much of the small business related info on the city's website was difficult to navigate and find information through. The result of this work has been a new set of organized information in the form of guides with heavy cross-pollination of content and tools for businesses looking to start, find a location, obtain financing, and more. As businesses continue to navigate the phases of reopening and SBBC builds additional tools and content, we welcome and encourage further development of these sections, within the city site and welcome the city to continue to leverage content developed by SBBC to extend the reach of this information. Additionally, earlier this year, Small Business BC was invited to participate in an interview related to the recent Employment Lands Economy Review and Commercial Districts Retail Study. In that interview, our main feedback surrounded around two specific topics. One being the need for additional business supports when it comes to digitization, and I'll speak a little bit more about that in a future slide. And two, around some of the challenges faced by independent small businesses when it comes to making a commitment to a bricks and mortar location in the city related to affordability and willingness to take on risk. From our experience with entrepreneurs, we communicated the key would be to develop more opportunities for entrepreneurs to showcase products and be able to test them out in a market without the high risk of taking on a traditional lease. And one solution we shared could be the creation of more pop-up spaces. Now, in light of the challenges of COVID-19, the notion of pop-up spaces and increased usage of outdoor space for small business marketplaces has emerged in many cities across the world. So we were delighted to see some of the recent announcements, I think on Friday, regarding the temporary East Vancouver pop-up space on Fraser and 27th. We hope there will be many more initiatives like this that provide opportunities to businesses who have been struggling and also to those who may just be starting out to begin building their brand awareness and provide easier access to customers. And Small Business BC would be happy to share any communications on initiatives like this and support those. Lastly, there are two other programs I'd like to highlight with additional detail, as I believe they might be critical to supporting Vancouver businesses moving forward. One is bizmap.ca and the other is Digital Main Street. In 2018, Small Business BC, in a partnership with the City of Vancouver and 17 BIAs from the Vancouver BIA Partnership, launched bizmap.ca, a powerful tool created to analyze and compare market data at the neighborhood level to help local businesses and communities grow. BizMap is intended to be a marketing tool and an important resource for prospective and existing businesses to aid in their market research and business planning processes. The site allows users to explore neighborhoods, compare neighborhood data using a comparison tool, and search for a location through site integrations with Spacelist. The key users for BizMap are businesses looking to locate, relocate, or expand, existing business owners to aid in business retention and growth by helping businesses to understand the customer characteristics of their area for the purpose of marketing and product development, property owners, realtors, and developers to help recruit business tenants and minimize vacancies, special event planners to help corporations and organizations find areas to host community events, and of course BIAs to help better understand their own market better and identify key trends with future planning. Currently, the site is a Vancouver-only tool with 17 neighborhoods you see featured here. However, there's been a great deal of interest from other municipalities and BIAs to expand the platform, and we are grateful for the City of Vancouver's support as we look forward to bringing BizMap to other areas of BC. In thinking about the evolution of BizMap, now in light of COVID-19, there are a number of opportunities to innovate the site and use it as a platform to extend the reach of local business improvement area initiatives, to support shop local campaigns, showcase neighborhood-specific opportunities for businesses, and also explore new innovative tools and mechanisms to host virtual pop-ups and marketplaces in the future. We are still beginning to formulate our ideas and concepts on the future extensions of BizMap, and concurrently, we are working on the launch of the Chinatown profile with 2019 business data, in addition to launching the first non-Vancouver BizMap neighborhoods in the coming weeks, which will be 2 communities on Vancouver Island. In addition to this, we'll also be looking towards updating the data for all existing BIAs. Again, BizMap is a unique tool in the sense that it is the only platform offering analysis and comparison of data at the neighborhood level, and it is scalable. We look forward to engaging in any future discussions on how this platform could support additional city initiatives moving forward. The very last concept I'd like to mention is the notion of digital adoption and transformation for businesses. COVID-19 has pushed many businesses to reassess and re-strategize to remain operating. And in many cases, these businesses have pivoted to a digital platform in order to continue selling their goods and services. Those who have not, simply because they don't have the funds or resources to do so, are falling behind and finding themselves in danger of closing for good. Small Business BC identified what we call the digital lag in some SMEs early, particularly through some of the work we do with small communities in BC's regions. And since then, we've been exploring multiple entrepreneurial solutions to help these businesses. The key program we zoned into was the Digital Main Street program, an initiative started by the Toronto Association of Business Improvement Areas and was supported by the Ontario government in the form of a 2-year project beginning in 2018. Digital Main Street is a program that helps Main Street businesses achieve digital transformation. The program is scalable and built around an online learning platform, structured training programs, small business grants, and municipality grants for digital service squads, which are teams of local recent graduates or students who help Main Street businesses one-on-one to grow and manage their operations through the adoption of digital tools and technology. Since then, Digital Main Street Group has also launched the Shop Here program, which has catapulted awareness of DMS across the country. And just last week, the province of Ontario and the federal government announced a $57 million investment into the Digital Main Street and Shop Here programming for that province. As mentioned, it was identified early that BC businesses could benefit from the direct supports on digital adoption. And for this reason, Small Business BC and Tabia have been working together on a DMS for BC concept for just over a year, well in advance of the COVID-19 pandemic. Given the current circumstances related to COVID, the effects of the digital lag are being felt even more dramatically. So we feel the window of opportunity to provide meaningful digital assistance to businesses is now. And because we believe Digital Main Street is exactly what BC entrepreneurs need, our goal, pending the successful commitment of funding, is to extend Digital Main Street services to not just bricks and mortar businesses, but to all businesses in BC. We are also very grateful to have received letters of support from the City of Vancouver, the Vancouver Economic Commission, the Vancouver BIA Partnership, and BIA BC for the DMS for BC initiative, as we continue to field numerous requests from entrepreneurs and municipalities across the province for assistance with digital transformation. For your reference, we've included a link within the presentation to the Digital Main Street platform and an informational video. To close things off, again, on behalf of Tom, myself, and the SBBC team, we sincerely appreciate being invited to participate in today's meeting and invite any future opportunities for further collaboration between the City of Vancouver and Small Business BC. Business service organizations like ours, BIAs, municipalities, now more than ever need to find ways to collaborate, share resources, and partner on initiatives to support the local SME community and help our BC businesses weather these unprecedented times. And I think with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. I'm very much appreciative of the presentation presented by, and I'd like to thank Tom Conway and as well as Sarah Clark. Also, just hoping that we might be able to have council hold their questions until after the presentations. If you're able to answer questions after the other presentations, would that be okay? That's what I'd suggest, Council. So thanks very much. Next, we have guest speakers. Muriel Protzer, Senior Policy Analyst, BC and North, and Samantha Howard, Senior Director, BC and North, Canadian Federation of Independent Business. And they also have a PowerPoint presentation. So I'll wait to make sure that they're ready to go here.
I'm ready, Moo. So we call Muriel Moo for short.
Oh, I'm
sorry.
Just trying to share my screen here. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. And I'm moving the box over to the other side to make sure that we can see the entire slideshow without any blockages. How is that looking for everyone?
Good. It's good.
Yeah, okay, it's good. Just make sure the clerk has it up on the, yes, I think that's perfect. So whenever you're ready, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We'd like to thank you so much for inviting us to present at the City of Vancouver's Economic Recovery and Complete Communities discussion. CFIB is extremely thankful for this opportunity to present the views of our members. We represent over 700 members in Vancouver proper, so these are small and medium-sized businesses, and over 10,000 in British Columbia. Today, as you've heard, you have myself, Muriel Protzer, who's the Senior Policy Analyst for BC in the North, and with me, Samantha Howard, the Senior Director of BC. We have been surveying our members weekly since the COVID-19 pandemic begun to fully understand the impact of what's happening on the ground. The recommendations that we have for you today are based on this data and in hopes to show what we believe the city can do to help support small and medium-sized businesses in the short term as we go through these transitionary phases, and some more medium and long-term suggestions on how to truly reach economic recovery. A lot of what we will share with you today is echoed by our previous presenters and unifies our strengthened voice here. With that, I'll pass the next slide on to my colleague, Samantha.
Thanks, Moo. So we do a lot of surveying of our members. As Muriel said, as soon as COVID struck, we've been doing weekly surveys just to get temperature taking for ourselves and also to inform all levels of government of what the impacts are on small business. So the good news is on this slide that the majority of SMEs are open to some degree. The concerning part is that half are only partially open and 10% are fully closed due to COVID. As you're likely aware, some sectors have been hit harder than others. The sectors we have listed here are those that have seen the largest decline in revenues since the pandemic started, which leads us to our next slide. We wanted to track how business revenues were doing, and in Vancouver, half have seen a 50% decline. That's a lot, considering that the vast majority of small businesses already operate on razor-thin margins, and with so many seeing such a significant decline, it becomes a challenge for them to be able to turn the lights on. It's important that all of us, and especially government, reminds ourselves how difficult it is for businesses right now, and that although we're in a reopening phase, many of them are nowhere near the strength that they were before. And any additional financial pressures or policies that are barriers to them operating under this current new situation will really stifle job creation and employment opportunities.
With that, we have some of our short-term recommendations. Due to the time restriction, I will verbally speak to our top recommendations, but for your convenience, we have the list of ideas for your review here. And should you have any questions on any of these points that we've raised in our slideshow, please do not hesitate to raise them or reach out when we are permitting questions. So for our first short-term recommendation, we're asking that the city do not add additional fiscal pressures to residents and businesses by keeping spending sustainable going forward. So in terms of what this looks like in the short term, we're asking the city introduce a hiring freeze and instead reallocate internal resources to support short-term needs. And with that, I'd like to share some of my own experience. In my position with CFIB, my main responsibilities are research and policy analysis, as you may imagine. But as the COVID pandemic began, we opened our phone lines to all small business owners across Canada and received a massive influx of inquiry, up to, I think we're at 40,000 inquiries. So those are small business owners calling in with questions for us. So a portion of my time is now solely dedicated to answering those questions. And through pivoting internally to meet the short-term needs and demands of our membership, that's how we're dealing with reallocation of internal resources. For our second point, we ask that the city temporarily eliminate penalty fees for late business license payments. This initiative would provide flexibility to many businesses who are behind payments or those who have seen significantly stunted revenues, as Samantha pointed out on the last slide, is very many businesses in the Greater Vancouver region. On top of that, while it may seem like not a lot a penalty fee, it may seem like a small amount to some. For business owners in this dire situation, it could really make a difference. And the last thing I'd like to raise before moving on to the preceding slide is the encouragement for council and mayor to participate in shop local campaigns. I've seen actually a lot of people on today, a lot of the councillors here today, supporting local businesses online through Twitter and other social media platforms, which is extremely encouraging to see, and we thank you for that. Additionally, I would like to raise that CFIB is launching a small business everyday campaign to help support local businesses. That will be launching next week, and there will be follow-up correspondence to keep you informed of that and ways that the city can help participate in that. Moving forward to our next section, we'd like to focus here on stimulating local economic growth as we do recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. And to really understand what businesses will need going forward, we would like to ask the questions and have the answers here. Or what are businesses most worried about, and what business finances may look like? So in terms of what businesses are most worried about during COVID-19, it's no surprise to see economic repercussion and consumer spending top as the worries. And the reason this is not so surprising is that if you look further down into the graph, 26% of respondents say they're worried about having to close their business permanently. Now, this data, I'll remind you, is a breakout for Greater Vancouver. So this does include other Metro Vancouver municipalities, but it is still specific to the picture of what's happening in Vancouver itself. And so while this is not to say that a fourth of businesses will close tomorrow, it certainly gives us an indication that additional support is still needed, whether that be financial or otherwise. On top of that, you'll see that business cash flow and debt are a large concern for small businesses going forward. So that's paying rent, meeting payroll, even being able to pay themselves. And with that, I move on to the next slide, as we wanted to ask our members who are small businesses, how are they actually paying for things right now? And while there are some great federal initiatives to help offer financing for small businesses, we found shockingly that 39% have had to tap into personal savings, and a further 33% are using their credit card. This evidently shows that business owners have had to make personal sacrifices, and this behavior is worrying and not something we want to promote or allow to continue going forward. If everyone is in debt, people and government, we face a serious problem. With that, I'll pass on our recommendations to Samantha.
Thanks, Moo. So we have we have five, I guess. But I'm just going to focus on one medium and one long-term goal that we'd like the city to concentrate on. One we've already referenced, but we thought repetition might serve as well in this presentation, is that the city be lenient with taxes and costs that are coming due. While we cannot defer costs forever, we strongly encourage that the city lower or remove any penalties for late payments and offer other financing options. We know Minister James has made reference to that on the provincial side with a lot of deferrals that have been taking place. At the provincial level as well, as you can imagine, when you're told you can, if you're a restaurant that can only open at 50% of its original capacity, it's pretty hard to make additional revenues to pay for those deferred taxes. And again, just to reiterate, that 26% are worried about having to close their businesses, and so every penny counts. On the longer term, more than ever, taxpayers' ability to pay needs to be reflected in municipal spending. As the city was looking at the budget increase on property taxes, 7% on Vancouverites, one of the highest in Metro Vancouver. We really feel that this is important for the city to look at under the current situation. It's going to be awfully difficult, especially as businesses pay a lot more of that proportionally to residents.
So with that, we'll move on to our next section in terms of how the city can best advocate for small businesses when communicating with the province and senior levels of government. While this slide has some numbers and figures on it, I will read out some of our recommendations as well. Hopefully the visuals can help you fully understand and best help me explain what our recommendations are based upon. So as you'll see on the left-hand side there, our first recommendation is about moving to an information technology center in the ever-growing digital world. There was already a trend for consumers to go towards online shopping even before the pandemic started. And if anything, this has lit a fire under small businesses to start progressing to move more to e-commerce sales. You'll see that 27% were already previously online, but as much as 12% have just started or are new to the digital world of making sales online. With this in mind, the CFIB would like to suggest that the city partner and work with the province in offering a technology center to help small businesses get resources to help them move more online. For example, it could look at partnering local IT companies or experts with small businesses. It could offer funding for adopting digital technologies, or it could even have an online information portal that helps guide businesses to what resources they need to accomplish their digital goals. The second thing I'd like to talk about is the property tax problem that is well known to many of Metro Vancouver cities and across British Columbia who have seen significant growth over the past years. But first and foremost, I would like to thank Mayor and Council for their resiliency to promote split assessment of commercial properties to the province. The skyrocketing property tax issue is not one that CFIB has forgotten. Lowering the overall property tax bill for small businesses who are so hard hit right now by lowering the tax rate on that development potential of commercial properties is the solution that we will continue to fight for, and we're very happy to see that it's something that the city has been on top of as well. For our third recommendation, I move to our next slide. You'll see bullet 3 there. What we're asking is that the city work with the provincial government to issue a partial refund of business-specific licenses. So to put this into perspective, our neighbors to the north, the Yukon Territory, actually did an initiative similar to this. They issued a 50% refund on liquor licenses to those businesses who hold those. We feel that given that there were provincial health orders of business closures, these businesses were forced to close but still expected to pay for licenses, whether that be their municipal business license or other provincial licenses such as the liquor licenses. We feel that this is something that the city and the province could work together on to find a solution to help issue a partial refund to these businesses who so desperately need access to financing right now. With that, I'll pass it on to Sam to go over our recommendations for the city in terms of how to improve service delivery going forward.
Thank you, Moo. So this is our last slide. I'm sure you guys will be happy to hear. It's pretty data heavy. Lots of recommendations for you to follow up on. These we feel are perhaps some low cost or no cost options that the city could look at to help improve the livelihood of small businesses. So the first one is Muriel and Tom and everybody's already talking about improving online user friendliness for businesses. There are great lessons learned out of the patio expansions and liquor. We're already being a bit more progressive. I think that's a great way to continue to go. And it is, I actually think the City of Vancouver has a very good website. It's fairly easy to use, but the issue is the steps behind it. And really looking internally at some of the barriers that business owners may be feeling when it comes to doing business with the City of Vancouver. I think it's a great time to do a regulatory review. The second is something that the province of British Columbia adopted in, I'm going to think it was around 2006. It was a small business lens on new policies and regulations. It is a 2-page document, or it was back in the day, it's a little longer now, that has some checklists for staff to self-identify before things come to cabinet, to ministers in cabinet, on what the new proposals will do in terms of costs for small business and regulations for small business. So that might be something that could be easily looked at and adopted by the city. We think expanding the CRC, the Commercial Renovation Center, would be a benefit to our members. I'm going to give another plug in here, which is not on this list, but I do think that a lot of the initiatives that Tom and Sarah mentioned would be extremely helpful. And we strongly support the expansion of BizMap. We think that's a great idea. Our last is a bit more difficult for the city to introduce, but it has been done in smaller municipalities, which is to introduce a permanent business license. So City of Langford and Colwood, 2 smaller municipalities, obviously, compared to Vancouver, have already done this. And basically, it's a lot of work. It can be a lot of work for business owners to have to go in and do a lot of paperwork about things that are very static, like their business names, their business location. So unless there's these other 2 municipalities have done, unless there's material change, it's just an automatic, everything is the same. And then you pay I think Langford waived the business fee, but Colwood you still have to pay. There's lots of different ways to do it, but I think it would be a streamlined process is what CFIB is looking for here. And with that, I think our song and dance is over, and we'll be happy to stay on to answer any questions. And thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here with us, and virtually and for presenting. There may be questions for you after, so great to hear that you can stay on. So Council, our third presentation is from guest speakers, Alina Marley, who is here as Acting CEO, and Meg O'Shea, Program Manager of Thriving Vancouver, Small to Medium Enterprises, Vancouver Economic Commission, who have a PowerPoint presentation for us, and they are joined by James Raymond, Senior Manager, Manager Research and Analysis. And I understand that James Raymond will be answering questions after the presentation as well. But we will be holding our questions until the end. So if we have Meg O'Shea on the line, please proceed with the presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Digenova. Hello, I'm Meg O'Shea. I'm Manager of Small to Medium Enterprises at the Vancouver Economic Commission. Also speaking today is Alina Marley, the Acting CEO at our organization. VEC is the Economic Development Agency of the City of Vancouver. We're working closely with the city and the business community in their respective mitigation, recovery, and restart efforts. And we're very grateful to do this work on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We're grateful today to be speaking with this committee and a fantastic panel of our collaborators on economic recovery and resilience. Our presentation today begins with a snapshot of Vancouver's economy before COVID-19 hit. And then building on the macroeconomic insights provided at the last session of this committee, I'll provide an overview of the impacts of COVID-19 on our local economy and highlight the challenges experienced by businesses over the last 3 months. I'll touch briefly on the hardest hit sectors of Vancouver's economy. And of course, you'll also be hearing from many sector experts this afternoon representing some of those hardest hit. And next, Alina will present a path to economic recovery and resilience in Vancouver. The strategies and recommendations we present are drawn from communication with the local business community, best practices emerging in other global cities, and they're in line with existing City of Vancouver commitments on the road to building a green, inclusive, equitable, and resilient city. All right, let's remind ourselves where we were before the pandemic. Starting at the top of the slide is a broad characterization of Vancouver's economy. Government policies at all levels influence local economies, and Vancouver is no different. We do stand out in some ways thanks to highly progressive municipal policies and being the only municipality in the province with our own building codes, for example. The foundation, though, of Vancouver's economy is our small business community. 98% of businesses present in Vancouver have fewer than 50 employees, and they cross all sectors and industries. We, of course, have some notable large companies, including Microsoft, Tech Resources, Aritzia, and TELUS, which employ large numbers of Vancouver residents and attract talent from all over the world. In many ways, though, Vancouver's economy is defined by our geography. Vancouver is a hub for regional, national, and international trade. We are Canada's gateway to Asia-Pacific markets and the Cascadia corridor, which extends down to Portland. And let's not forget our natural capital. Vancouver's natural setting and moderate climate are a big draw for businesses, for workers, for tourists, and for investors. On this foundation, a number of industries are thriving and driving local economic prosperity. Before COVID-19 hit, key sectors driving our economy included film and creative production, tourism, real estate and finance, technology, and a booming entrepreneurship in the green economy. Together, the economic foundations and vibrant sectors of Vancouver's economy create a highly livable city with a high rate of economic growth. Vancouver is ranked as the fastest growing and most diverse economy in Canada for many years running. However, all these strengths should not eclipse economic hardships also experienced here. Vancouver has the third worst income disparity among Canadian cities and an affordability crisis that ranks on the global scale. Land prices are skyrocketing, affecting residential and commercial property. Industrial lands in Vancouver are particularly threatened, and this has far-reaching implications for our environment and economy. While Vancouver's pre-COVID economy was growing steadily, there are also serious and systemic issues contributing to economic disparity and risk. And then the global pandemic happened. While our local economy has some attributes that increase economic resilience, we're also highly dependent on global flows, such as tourism and the relatively nomadic film industry. When borders snapped shut, our local industries came to a standstill. and so did the circulation of associated revenue and local jobs. As of April, 40% of Vancouver-based businesses had closed the doors, some temporarily and some permanently. The final tally of permanent closures due to COVID-19 will likely not be known for quite some time. The total number of jobs in Vancouver dropped by over 20% in the space of 6 weeks, and the regional unemployment rate dropped from an enviable 4% pre-COVID to 14% by end of April. These cuts and closures are disproportionately affecting people who historically faced greater barriers to economic opportunity, including visible minorities, Indigenous, youth, and women. It's now June, and some businesses have reopened or pivoted during the pandemic to establish new business models and revenue streams. But we're not out of the woods yet. This list is probably not news to anyone here. If it is, you've certainly been under a rock. Businesses have experienced significant challenges during the pandemic, including mandated closures, the unfortunately slow release of financial aid, and high levels of uncertainty around recovery timelines. The challenge of retaining employees, in particular, was exacerbated by daycares and schools closing across the province, which added stress on employees and business owners who have children at home. And sudden restrictions on foreign workers posed a serious threat to some industries, especially those that are seasonal, such as agriculture, tourism, and construction. The global pandemic did force businesses to think quickly on their feet, moving to new delivery modes like e-commerce, and some even transformed assembly lines to produce items such as masks and gloves that were in high demand. And while this quick thinking did challenge those businesses, in some cases, it also created new revenue streams, it forged new local supply relationships, and new vending opportunities with municipal, provincial, and federal governments. But some of Vancouver's key sectors were more susceptible to the economic impacts than others. Overall, hospitality, tourism, and film and TV production in Vancouver have experienced the sharpest downturn due to COVID-19. Small businesses that were already digitally savvy, such as, say, legal services and software development, were able to quickly transition to work remotely. The $2 billion month-on-month lost revenue you see here is happening in non-digitally enabled sectors, such as landscaping, food service, and storefront retail. The highest rate of layoffs in Canada is in businesses with 5 to 19 employees, which really brings home how exposed to risk small businesses are. Women-owned, visible minority-owned, and Indigenous-owned businesses also had to lay off more staff than their contemporaries, which exposes the disproportionate economic impact of COVID-19 and continuing societal inequities. Film and TV production in BC shut down almost completely when the borders closed, which forecasts a loss of up to $2.8 billion in direct spend in Vancouver this year. Hotels and restaurants had to close their doors. Some were able to pivot to takeout and delivery models in order to retain a portion of their revenue and some staff. Next, before we turn to Alina for slides on recovery and economic resilience, here are the big takeaways I want you to take with you. Small businesses that are not digitally enabled are more at risk in times of economic upheaval. Inequities based on historical prejudices persist and continue to affect entrepreneurs and workers in our modern economy. A local economy that is highly dependent on international movement and finance is also highly susceptible to disruptions in global mobility. A diverse economy is more resilient, and a locally interconnected economy is more resilient. And now on to Alina.
Thank you, Meg. I'm Alina Marley, Acting CEO for the Vancouver Economic Commission. I will now turn to outlining the potential path to economic recovery, with a focus, as requested, on the City of Vancouver's role, and by extension, the UC. Together, we can continue to undertake 4 key roles in planning and take action against towards economic recovery and in building future economic resilience.
Did we lose you? I just noticed the sound quality was...
Hello. Hi, sorry.
Hi.
Did you hear my introduction then?
I could hear a little bit of what you were saying. I'm not
Okay.
sure
Let
about
me
the
just
rest
start
of
again.
council, but now, yeah, that would be great. Thank you very
Wonderful.
much.
Thank you. Bit of technical issue there. Okay, so thank you, Meg. I'm Alina Marley, Acting CEO for the Vancouver Economic Commission, and I will now turn to outline a potential path to economic recovery with a focus, as requested, on CEV's role and, by extension, BEC's. Together, we can continue to undertake 4 key roles in planning and taking action towards economic recovery and in building future economic resilience. And these are the tabs along the top of the slide. So the first one is stay informed. And we need to continue to engage in a meaningful way with all parts of the business community. Those represented by BIAs and industry associations, those are storefronts, large employers, and those less visible and underheard. This likely means continuing to adapt who we engage with and how. Secondly, embedding business intelligence and robust economic data into our wider policy and decision-making is a key component to understanding and meeting the needs of our diverse business community in order to build a diverse, resilient and healthy city for our residents. BC has worked to improve the quality of Vancouver economic metrics and intelligence, culminating in the economy report you have received. This has been challenging given the availability of strong local data, and we know this has been the same experience of our peers. We welcome the ongoing collaboration with City of Vancouver and other regional municipalities to continue to collectively advocate Stats Canada and others for alternative data just to support more strongly building economy-related data into our wider decision-making. And finally, when the time is right, we welcome the opportunity to collectively take a moment to reflect on the economic lessons of the last few months, and with City of Vancouver and BC together, refresh our Vancouver Economic Action Strategy in support of Council's economy building priority. This will allow us to collectively clarify and reaffirm our economic priorities and will be a key building block to the economy pillar of the Vancouver Plan. So next, get creative. As you're hearing, there is so much uncertainty and the majority of our business community is struggling to stay viable, keep people in jobs and provide the products and services we need. With no clear sight on the timeline to a new norm or ability to survive a second wave. Now is the time for us all to remain focused on the current local needs, but keep an eye on Vancouver's future economic potential and get creative in what we do and how we deliver our services. The City of Vancouver has a robust recovery program in place, coordinating and aligning recovery efforts across city teams, the VEC, and with other strategic partners. It is essential that this continues with an open mind to how agile we can be in what we do now and in the future. And through VEC's outreach with our business community and our assessment of recovery plans nationally and globally, our top recommendation for recommendations for the city is to continue to assess and implement the following. And that's continue to adapt and expedite business-related processes, not least permitting and licensing, prioritising safe, alternative and flexible working practices, particularly for businesses not digitally enabled, hospitality, childcare services and urban agriculture. And seek opportunities and collaborate with other levels of government to rationalise and seek flexibility in business-related charges and taxes where able. And seek opportunities for alternate and shared use of public spaces for commerce, including outdoor and indoor spaces, and protecting and enhancing our industrial employment lands. So at the core of the City of Vancouver and BC are long-standing commitments to a low-carbon, equitable, diverse and resilient community. And in line with growing global calls for action, now is the time to reinforce these priorities as they are pivotal to our path to economic recovery and building sustained resilience for our future economy and community. The City of Vancouver, supported by BEC, have a key role to play to deliver programs and initiatives and to advocate loudly for Vancouver's economy. Continue to invest in diversity and equity programs that distribute employment density citywide, grow and attract values-based companies, and continue to support increasing capacity in impact organisations such as Exchange in a City and support local in partnership with Loco BC. Number 2 is reaffirm and expedite our commitment to building a circular economy, including advocating for green buildings and retrofit, buy local programs, urban agriculture and circular resources. And the third you see there is build resilient local ecosystems, including central hubs for local food systems, digitally enabled retail, such as Small Business BC's Digital Main Street program, which City of Vancouver and BC are active supporters of. And finally, encourage innovation and targeted investments to support the growth of local businesses. Examples include investing in 5G and continue to support BC's own technology deployment network and capital attraction programs. Thank you. Okay, so finally, our four tabs. Continuing to have solutions-driven, meaningful collaborations with others is so key. There is much we can continue to do and do better, but we do not have the mandate or the power to build a path to recovery or build a more resilient future economy without working with others regionally and globally to secure sustainable and transformational change. And the last few months have shown the reality of how interdependent we are across the public and private sector, across industries locally, regionally, and globally, and the interconnectivity of our local and regional workforce and supply chains. As part of understanding the economic impacts of COVID-19, BC is connected with sectors we would not traditionally actually engage with, such as working closely with Tourism Vancouver, who are speaking next. And we've been privileged to be part of understanding their issues, supporting their advocacy for mitigation, and being vocal in recovery planning across sectors. And we're passionate that remaining locally focused but regionally and globally connected is paramount for Vancouver's resilience and diversity. And collaboration and advocacy priorities that the City and BC can continue to champion today are fourfold. Number one is coordinate metro-wide economic development priorities, including investment stimulus for green buildings, digital infrastructure like 5G, and targeted capital investment to support our local small businesses. Advocate the continuation of wages, business subsidies, and rationalisation of business costs. Continue to work with partners to expedite investment in childcare and out-of-school care, and support targeted programs to strengthen local and cross-border supply chains and capital attraction with a focus on Vancouver's local business needs. Now is an opportunity to better understand the needs and potential of the Vancouver economy and advocate boldly to continue to secure support from other levels of government and the business investment communities. So coming to a close, I just want to make a mention for BC's developed an economy report through the course of this pandemic to capture robust local and global metrics and intelligence, and it's available to all, and we really welcome feedback on it. And it's been a privilege to have the opportunity to hear the other organisations speaking today and in the previous session, and to address you all. And as a closing remark, BC sees that the economy is intrinsically linked to building strong and healthy communities now and in the future. And jobs and businesses support our families and build our communities. And on behalf of the City of Vancouver and our local business community, BC is privileged to play our part in supporting the growth of a prosperous, inclusive, low-carbon, resilient economy for Vancouver. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'd like to thank Galina Marley and Meg O'Shea, and Council may have questions for you afterwards. We will now move on to the next presentation. Next, we have guest speaker Ted Lee, Acting CEO of Tourism Vancouver, who will provide a verbal presentation. And Ted is joined by Gwendolyn Castellan, Manager, Sustainable Destination Development. Ted, are you ready to proceed with your presentation?
Yes, thanks. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Fantastic. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and thank you for taking the time to engage with us and for the invitation to speak to you today. As mentioned, I'm Ted Lee. I am the Acting CEO for Tourism Vancouver. I might note that my new chief is actually coming on July 13th, so hopefully at some point that Council will have the opportunity to meet up with him. So I'll be speaking today about the state of tourism and economic recovery, and the presentations I've heard are amazing. In fact, some of those are wonderful slides. Speakers have been great, and no surprise that we have actually similar information. So I will try not to duplicate those. So to begin, Tourism Vancouver was established in 1902. That's right, not too much older or younger than the City of Vancouver. And we are, of course, the official tourism agency for our destination, and we represent just about 1,000 tourism-related businesses in the Metro Vancouver area. So these, of course, include all the sectors, such as hotels and attractions, sightseeing, meetings and conventions, and so forth. So to begin, I want to first acknowledge that we are engaging each other on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people, in particular the Musqueam, the Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. So to state the obvious, our industry is going through extremely challenging times. In order to flatten the curve, which we all know about, Health restrictions here and around the world necessitated a rapid shutdown of the travel industry. We were hit early and we were hit extremely hard. And as we now know, in Vancouver, we will have no cruise ship season this year. Our borders remain closed, so we have no international visitors. And we have no large conventions or events in the foreseeable future until a vaccine or effective treatment is found. So, yeah, things are not good. Essentially, there is practically no visitor economy going on right now in Vancouver. Our industry is at best on life support. Without help, and as mentioned by the other speakers, I fear that many of our tourism businesses will not survive. And if that happens, many of the approximately 105,000 people employed in our sector, in our city, and in our region will be at risk of losing their jobs, if not already, and their livelihoods. And these may include many students who normally depend on the seasonal tourism employment to earn their much-needed tuition money over the summer. So, according to the Metro Vancouver Tourism and Hospitality Recovery Task Force, the mouthful, which I'll speak to more just a little bit later on, tourism contributed just over $14 billion to the Metro Vancouver economy in 2019. Now, these include both day travelers and overnight travelers from elsewhere. So furthermore, the task force estimated that the impact of COVID and the shutdown of tourism and travel will result in the following impacts. First, $9.8 billion will be lost in tourism spending, which is about a 68% decline from a pre-COVID scenario. In addition, $5.8 billion will be lost in contributions to GDP, $4 billion of lost income, which is the equivalent of about 72,000 jobs in Metro Vancouver. And lastly, $2.6 billion in lost taxes to all levels of government. So, with these in mind, and to address the question, what is particularly important to us? Well, I think the answer is simply this, is that we need to recognize that tourism is a valuable asset representing the welfare of not just businesses, but the livelihoods, the many people and jobs in our community. We should never take tourism for granted because as we now know, that without travel, the world and much of our daily lives literally grind to a halt. So tourism and travel, it's worth saving, it's worth protecting, preserving, and nurturing as we work to move forward. Going now to the key challenges, and many of them have already been mentioned by the previous speakers, but to be sure, there are many challenges, and given the wide spectrum of subsectors and operators, those challenges may be a bit nuanced. So many subsectors, as I mentioned before, accommodations, transportation, sightseeing, they are all part and support travel and tourism in our region. I'm going to touch on a few of the basic ones. So the most urgent one, obviously, as mentioned, has to do with cash flow and liquidity. I'll just sort of put here that there is a deadline for the recalling of the temporary laid off employees. That was extended thanks to government for being responsive from a maximum of 13 weeks to 16 weeks. And for a lot of tourism businesses that may have done this a little bit early, those 16 weeks are coming to a close. And so if they're not able to recall their employees, given the fact that tourism really has not reopened, they're going to be triggering terminations and therefore they need to pay out severance. So that's going to cause another burden on tourism businesses in that situation. The role of the city there could be, if you're talking to the province, that is something to pay attention to. The other one that has been mentioned is that we've really not heard that much success as it relates to the commercial rent subsidy program. So, the federal government have announced that it is, at the end of the day, a provincial jurisdiction, and ultimately landlords must decide to participate in that. But from a tourism standpoint, we've not heard too much of a positive sort of result in that program. And related to this, I would like to circle back to my reference and draw your attention to one sector in particular, which is the whole event sector, which includes meetings, conventions, and large gatherings such as entertainment, concerts, and community events. This sector, as I'm sure you know, is facing a very dire road ahead, given the fact that we are now allowed to host gatherings of more than 50 people until a vaccine is found. So at best guess, right, I've heard anywhere from a minimum of 12 to 18 months. Of those are just guesses about when a vaccine can be found. So simply put, operators in this sector will not last that long. So they need help. We've been working with the province, but given where the virus is at, there is no appetite for the province right now to consider increasing the maximum of 50 for now, which is understandable. So we know that there are no easy or apparent solutions, but we will not give up, and we will continue to work to find a way to help our industry get through this somehow. My sort of final thought in terms of challenges going forward, as we contemplate about recovery, notwithstanding that the virus, yes, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, but the virus and therefore health protocols will continue to dictate what we can and can't do. Let me sort of try and summarize what I think will be sort of three focus areas for us to consider in terms of trying to put our challenges into a bite-sized kind of pieces. So the first really is about rebuilding consumer or visitor confidence. So people need to know that if they're able to travel to our destination, that we are safe. So great work's been happening at the airport and so forth, or even airlines. But what happens when they get beyond the airport? So how can all of us in the travel ecosystem ensure that we are able to provide this sense of assurance and safety to travelers who want to come to Vancouver? The second is about nurturing positive resident or community sentiment towards visitors when they do come here. I think we've already heard stories about other areas, but definitely how do we ensure that as a host community that we are welcoming and that we treat visitors rightly when they are here. And the third, as I had mentioned, is the challenge to help preserve and perhaps stimulate tourism supply as we move forward. To be frank, as we know, not everybody is going to be able to make it to the other side. But when we do get to the other side, what measures, what incentives can we put in place to encourage innovation and new developments in the tourism supply side of things? Moving now quickly on to the question of how the city can best support economic recovery. My simple suggestion at this point is simply that we establish an ongoing process for communication, updates, and information sharing in order to inform decision-making, both from a policy standpoint and both for businesses in terms of how they should be moving forward. I do want to acknowledge and thank city staff, especially at the EOC. They reached out to us in the early onset of COVID to keep us informed as to the role of the city, and that consultation was very helpful. As an industry, we knew early on that we needed to bring together not just industry, but all the major infrastructure groups like the airport and the Port of Vancouver and government to work together on potential solutions. As such, as I mentioned before, we helped form the Metro Vancouver Tourism and Hospitality Response and Recovery Task Force. This group has now, 60 plus organizations with people such as the port, hotels, and so forth. And the Ministry of Tourism is also there, as well as Destination British Columbia, Destination Canada, and so forth. We've been meeting on a weekly basis. We have a conference call every Wednesday, and that's been happening since March. I'm thankful, and I want to point out that Paul Mulcree has been part of those calls, and he's been on the group since the beginning. And also, Councillor Kirby Young has joined us in these past weeks. So the focus of the task force is really to advocate to government, to educate and inform and share with government the issues that we're facing as an industry, and secondly, to formulate plans for recovery as we move forward. So I would therefore ask this committee and council then to perhaps look at a more formal structure to how we as an industry can be working with the city through this task force as we move forward. So let me perhaps stop here in the interest of time, but let me end by saying that we know that as an industry, we are still deep in the woods, as I'm sure we can all agree. We need help. We know, though, that travel will resume at some point and that we need to work together. And by persevering, we will have a better chance of getting past this pandemic and return to profitability. So tourism can and we will play a role in building strong communities. So thank you again, Council, for the opportunity to speak with you today, and we'll have a chat with you later. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Very much appreciate your presentation, and we will hold our questions until later. Next, we have our next presentation, Council, is by Alicia Masong, Acting Director, Exchange. Just a moment, Council. I'm just getting a little bit of feedback on the line. I'm gonna ask Council if you can hear me okay.
We can hear you, but there is a bit of an echo.
Okay, I wanted to see if it was me or not. So just wanted to remind everyone who's not speaking or presenting, if you could please turn your microphones on mute, that would be great. Thank you. So our next speaker is Alicia Masong, Acting Director, Exchange in Inner City, Vancouver, who also has a PowerPoint presentation for us. And the letter has also been distributed, Council, which Alicia will reference in the presentation. And Alicia, whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you, everybody. I hope you can see my presentation okay.
We can
and
see
can
it
hear me
fine.
okay.
Hear
Perfect.
you just fine, thanks.
Great. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Alicia Masong, and I'm the Acting Director for Exchange Inner City. I'd like to thank Council and City staff for this opportunity to present today and for the opportunity to bring in the perspective of the nonprofit sector, the inner city community, and recognizing our most vulnerable populations as being a part of the economy and are important in the process of supporting its recovery. As such, I'm coming to Council today to speak about the importance of collaborative leadership going forward with our communities and between existing community networks and the City of Vancouver in order to effectively support economic recovery. On behalf of Exchange Inner City and other community networks in the downtown east side, like the Community Coordinated Response Network organized by Community Impact Real Estate Society, we recommend the following 6 initiatives as important contributions to support the city's economic recovery. We also believe these 6 recommendations answer all of Council's committee guiding questions. And so here are our 6 recommendations that Council can do to support economic recovery and ensure complete communities. We're asking the Council and the City can accelerate implementation of existing social procurement policy to support the recovery of small business and social enterprises. To expand and refine the City's current community benefit agreement policy to include that all development projects, both private and public, require community benefit targets that would commensurate with the size of the project. To move market rentals, nonprofit and cultural purpose city properties, and some property endowment fund properties to Community Impact Real Estate Society. And that we ask that the city contribute to a repayable social value fund to provide loans and patient capital for the inner city social enterprise sector. We also ask that the city continue to support and enhance existing peer employment programs. And lastly, that the city considering investing in social enterprises to help coordinate food services and address the scarcity of food provision across the city. I would like to take a moment to thank staff and acknowledge the work they have done in collaboration with Exchange Inner City and other community networks over the past 3 months to support many of the initiatives highlighted in our recommendations to Council today. But I also encourage Council's leadership to ensure that the city continues to work collaboratively with us on these recommendations long term. Before I go into more details about each of these recommendations, I do want to share who Exchange Intercity is and why we can help the city with implementing these strategies for economic recovery. Exchange Intercity is a community backbone organization located in the downtown east side, focused on community economic development initiatives. We are comprised of over 50 members who represent the following stakeholder groups: local and low-income residents, the nonprofit sector, social enterprises, community foundations, BIAs, Indigenous-based organizations, and of course, City of Vancouver liaisons in arts, culture, community services, and social planning. Exchange Intercity's purpose is to increase access to low-barrier employment opportunities and to increase access to affordable goods, services, and spaces in the inner city. As such, our mission and vision is to collectively cultivate a vibrant and inclusive local economy where all can thrive and live full, rewarding lives. As I mentioned earlier, we are not alone in the work that we do in the inner city community. We have been involved with a network that has brought together community partners that haven't traditionally worked together before. That is the Community Coordinated Response Network, which totals to about 40 active members, but is sharing information with over 300 individuals in the community. In the past 3 months, together as a community, along with city support, we have accomplished some of the following, which we believe help minimize the impact of the pandemic on the inner city. The City of Vancouver had funded $200,000 per phase to the Downtown Eastside Peer Network that got created as a result of the pandemic. $190,000 per phase went directly into the pockets of peers and local residents. This provided 120 people with employment per week across 8 to 10 grassroots organizations and resulted in 9,500 hours of work per 40-day period to peers. This is employment and income to people who don't qualify for other government benefits like employment insurance and the CERB. This means it's more people making an income in our community, increasing the number of Vancouverites that are able to spend money in the inner city, helping to keep money circulating within our local economy. The pandemic had also exposed to us a gap in the city's food provision in an emergency, particularly making sure that food gets out to people in private SROs. In response, a consortium of social enterprises led by Potluck Cafe came together to deliver 90,000 meals within the first 60 days to approximately 35 private SROs and hundreds of folks on the street. Beyond this, we also know that the social enterprise community is very valuable. By Social Canada had done a study in the fall of 2019, and even though we have over 75 social enterprises in Vancouver, the 40 that responded employ 2,864 people, 447 are full-time, and 55% of those full-time employees are folks facing barriers to employment. 2,175 are part-time employees, which 90% are folks facing barriers to employment. And the social enterprise provides $18.4 million in wages to employees per year. It's only a sample of stats and accomplishments that have been done over the last 3 months and by the community over the last several years. I will be sharing more examples and information as I go into more detail about each of our recommendations. So the first recommendation, to accelerate implementation of existing social procurement policy and support recovery of small, diverse-owned businesses and social enterprise. Having the city establish annual measurable outcomes or unbundling larger contracts to create subcontracting opportunities for social enterprises and small businesses, as well as providing direct award contracts, help social enterprises to access opportunities beyond the $75,000 that are already available to them. But another way to increase these opportunities is to utilize trade agreement thresholds to expand small business access and require that social value outcomes for all City of Vancouver suppliers and contractors be available in contracts, such as targeted employment, accessible training, supply chain social value outcomes, and community development outcomes. The social procurement policy that the city has is good, but the implementation of this policy does need to be stronger. This will help build a more resilient and sustainable local economy with a specific focus on small and diverse business and social enterprise and local jobs, and will foster a healthier and just city. It will also help to increase resiliency of these sectors and prepare for future waves of COVID-19 or other emergencies. It ultimately keeps these sectors alive, especially the social enterprises, and the city can advocate that all three levels of government come together to align their social procurement practices and implementation. Beyond the social procurement policy, the city's procurement process also needs to be more nimble and accessible in order to respond quickly to emergent needs. During these first 3 months of the pandemic, the community groups did have to front quite a number of significant amounts of money, around hundreds of thousands of dollars in the first 2 months before city funding was able to come through for these initiatives. So if another emergency were to happen or COVID hit again, we are going to need to improve this process. Our next recommendation is to expand the city's current community benefit agreement policy to include all development projects require a benefit that targets and commensurates with the size of the project. For example, for development projects less than 100,000 square feet, encourage that 3 to 5% of the project achieve first source hiring and local social procurement targets through all phases of the project. This expansion of the policy is consistent with staff's recommendations in 2018. And furthermore, the city can advocate to provincial and federal governments to align their CBA policies to ensure that these employment and procurement opportunities are available on provincially and federally funded development projects within the City of Vancouver. Essentially, Exchange Intercity and its members should be at the table with city partners to discuss and implement expansion of the CBA policy. And this recommendation also answers Council's guiding questions in that it supports business, social enterprises, and nonprofits with reopening and returning to work. It provides opportunities for people to change jobs or to upskill and gain new work. It supports the city in creating a new, better normal, leaving the city better off. And it advances goals of service excellence, sustainable and green practices, and offers opportunities for building affordable housing. Our third recommendation is that the city move market rentals, nonprofit, cultural purpose city properties, and some PEF properties to series to increase access to affordable space for nonprofits so that they can expand their services and hire more people, especially people with barriers. And series can reinvest these profits from market rentals back into their respective communities and support the development of social enterprises. The value of the series model is that it relieves the city of having to do property management work and can allocate staff resources elsewhere. For example, if series, and when I say series, I mean Community Impact Real Estate Society, if they were to add one of the Tim Hortons as a market tenant into their portfolio, this could support 3 non-market spaces so that a nonprofit, a new social entrepreneur, maybe a social enterprise could occupy those spaces and only have to pay operating costs but no rent. The series model is an economic multiplier for our city, and it provides community ownership and builds capacity and stability of small businesses and social enterprises. And it certainly answers many of the council's guiding questions. Essentially, series is available to support the city with this initiative and would be happy to resume discussions with council and the city manager on this. The city could also contribute to a repayable social value fund to provide loans and patient capital for the inner city social enterprise sector. This could be similar to the City Social Enterprise Fund. This looks beyond cumbersome grants as a way to build capacity of social enterprise sector and help them get through the next year. The city could potentially use the money from government-insured saving accounts where you get about 1 to 2% return, and instead get 1.5 to 2.5% return from the social value that social enterprises create. This recommendation again answers several of council's guiding questions. Our next recommendation is that the city continue to support existing peer employment programs long-term so that peers can work in complement with city staff to provide street outreach, share nonprofit and health resources and information, deliver food and donations to people on the streets, help people stay physically distanced in lineups, be hired as support staff at outdoor respite sites and city parklet spaces, and be available as phone call supports to isolated residents and much more. Additionally, the city could also encourage local business and BIAs to partner with these peer programs as a key element to support businesses with street-level concerns and outreach, providing more peer employment opportunities, creating neighborhood relationships, and economic inclusion. For example, more BIAs could have programs like the Eastside Works Chinatown Community Steward Program, as this has shown to be a successful model. Or they could employ peers to be community ambassadors in community placemaking initiatives. Another example that happened through the Coordinated Community Response Network during this pandemic was the community, nonprofit, social enterprise, the BIAs, and local businesses and peers came together to do a bilingual health poster on how to keep safe during COVID-19 and where the community could go to get accurate information, as there was a lot of misinformation scaring folks in the inner city at the time. Thank you to Hastings Crossing BIA and Strathcona BIA. They were able to cover the cost of printing, and peers from Mission Possible, Binners, Atira, and local residents helped to distribute flyers and put up the posters throughout our inner city, and a local graphic designer and community organizer provided their services for free to get a lot of this done. This is just an example that shows how peers can work with so many different cross-sector organizations and folks to do a great work in the community that is vitally needed. We are thankful that the city acknowledges peer work as viable and legitimate work and has supported it before and during the pandemic. But to ensure sustainability of these programs, it's helpful that the city advocate to senior levels of government to also recognize peer work as legitimate work and as part of the employment spectrum, so that these work opportunities are available via the province through Work BC contracts and are also considered for funding from provincial and federal governments as necessary work during a pandemic, during other emergencies, and is always in need to support economic resilience and complete communities. And as mentioned before, these initiatives help to meet several of Council's guiding questions in building a more resilient, sustainable local economy that fosters a more healthier and just city. Our last recommendation is that the city consider investing in social enterprise like Potluck, Have Cafe, Save on Meats to coordinate food services and address the scarcity of food provision in the inner city and more broadly. Throughout the work of the Community Coordinated Response Network, it was evidence that there are gaps in the city's food provision, especially to folks living in private SROs where they don't have the access to the same public funded supports that publicly funded housing provides. The consortium of food-based social enterprises coming together, along with the local businesses like Wildebeest, South Hall Banquet Center, Teamster Unions, and Goodly Foods, and various peer networks in community, proves that this is a collaborative model that works. It ensures folks who fall between the cracks of the system are getting fed. It helps keep these social enterprises and small businesses and peers working and making an income during this pandemic and beyond. This food scarcity issue will not be gone once the pandemic is over. This is a vital program that needs to continue long-term to ensure everyone in our city is healthy and fed. So in closing, we want to express that the community is here to help the city through the economic recovery and ensuring complete communities. Networks like Exchange Inner City, the Community Coordinated Response Network, Downtown Eastside Peer Employment Networks, and Downtown Eastside Response, and Potluck Food Consortium, and more, are here to help. We have the social infrastructure and relationships to respond effectively to emergencies, but we can be even stronger with the support of the city to work alongside us long-term, share in our advocacy efforts, and expand and improve upon existing policies and practices as highlighted in our recommendations today, so that there's more accessible and far-reaching services and we're not leaving anyone behind. Again, thank you so much for this opportunity to present today, and I will be staying on to answer questions.
Thanks so much, Alicia. Council, we have two more presentations. Before we'll get to questions, you can put yourself on the queue if you do have questions. And our next speaker is Mary Rao, President and CEO of the Canadian Urban Institute. And I understand, Mary, that you have a PowerPoint? President?
I do. Do I just share my screen, or do you show it?
I will ask the clerk to advise, but I believe that you will share your screen.
And you'll all magically see it.
That is correct. Up here in council chambers.
Good. You can see it. Okay. I can't see it, so I don't know what you're actually looking at. But I'm happy to just ask you to advance the slide. Is that all right?
You can ask our clerk to advance the slides, and maybe I'll ask the clerk to offer any other suggestions.
Yes.
As the clerk is in the chamber. Thanks.
Yes, Chair DeGenova, we can, if the presenter can identify when she needs the next slide, we can do that.
Okay, thank you. I'll just look at my own copy. So as you can see, I have a really scintillating cover copy there of me. I'm Mary Rowe. The Canadian Urban Institute's 30 years old, and I see that Jean is on this call. She and I just finished another call about the future of housing and how housing is going to change across the country. And, you know, we're in a really unusual moment here where we have an opportunity to try to address systemic challenges that are hitting cities across the country, conditions that pre-existed COVID, and that we're trying to figure out how do we actually emerge from or continue to live with COVID, but emerge in a way that actually addresses systemic challenges so that we don't just revert to the mean, as they say. So the second slide shows you that once COVID hit, we did a couple of things. We're in the connective tissue business at CUI. We really believe that if we connect city builders, policymakers, activists, community leaders, private business folks, not-for-profits, cultural animators, if we connect people across the country in urban environments, they're going to learn, they're going to adapt quicker, they're going to share best practices, we're going to all try some stuff, it's going to work, some of it's going to work, some of it isn't. So we put up those three platforms, City Watch, City Share, and City Talk. If you go to the next slide, it will show you the specifics on City Watch. So in that case, that's 62 cities, volunteers across the country who are tracking all the various measures that each municipal government has taken across the country, 62. And that's everything from when did you declare an emergency, what's happened to your shelters, what's happening with your public spaces, what's happening with business licensing processes, all that kind of thing. This is updated daily. And the reason we did that is because we knew that no one was going to have time to figure out what anybody else was doing. And so we quickly got these platforms up. The next one is City Share, similar kind of mechanism, but tracking a different quality. You can go to these sites and you can see them. City Share is about community-based resilience responses. There's several hundred examples of things that community groups, institutions, various first responders have done, not necessarily municipal government, to address a particular challenge that's in front of them. This is really about community-based resilience and how do we, again, collectively, we had to put all hands on deck. Everyone knows this because the emergency services departments were completely flooded with all they could deal with. I think it's a really instructive illustration of how cities need to be created and managed and built and planned by everyone. And City Share, whenever you're feeling depressed, just go to City Share and you'll see remarkable things that people have done across the country. The last one that we put up, which has ended up being phenomenally important, we hadn't anticipated it would be, is City Talk Canada. And that's 3 sessions live, coast to coast, every week, with people talking about specific domains and specific challenges. And you need to, you can imagine that economic recovery, and particularly the recovery of independent businesses, has become a dominant theme in those conversations. On Friday, this Friday, we'll be at 100 days of COVID, and CUI is doing 6 of these, coast to coast, starting at 8:30 in the morning in Atlantic time, and then finishing in your time zone at the end of the day, 6 briefings from people who are on the ground engaged in what's going on. And I can well imagine that economic recovery is going to be a thread going through each of those sessions. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that one of the things that we've doubled down on at CUI is this whole notion of what it's going to take to bring back Main Street. And because I am an absolutely abysmal graphic person, you'll see that I have misspelled the domain name. It should be Bring Back Main Street, just like it sounds. I don't know what the heck I put in there, but it's not okay. And you'll see there that we're working with a number of partners, including Van City and a number of BIAs across the country, and looking very carefully at what the particular challenges are that are facing Main Streets. And for us, Main Streets are a proxy for neighborhoods, for complete communities, as is being suggested here by the focus of your committee and by the topic that you're trying to address today. And I appreciate my fellow presenters. I was skimming all their presentations, and I think you're going to hear a lot of commonality in terms of what we're suggesting. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see a plug here for COVID100.ca, which is really trying to create a roadmap for us to be. We're releasing a report on Friday, and all we're going to do there is start to signal, here are the 8, 10, 12, 15 things that we have to now double down on for the next 100 days, so that if you go to the last slide, you'll see our lovely little logo, and then I'm just going to speak specifically to what I think your committee should be considering. One, if you have to, local governments don't have the resources they need in Canada. You don't have the resources, you don't have the you don't have the dedicated revenue resources. You have revenue that you use your fees and through property tax, but you don't have sufficient sustainable resources to be able to provide the essential services that urban dwellers and then therefore the country needs to have efficient, productive economies. So obviously one of the fundamental things that you as a council will be coming to terms with, and I know you've struggled with it before and you will continue to, is what's the relationship with the provincial and the federal governments as you now hemorrhage dollars, particularly around transit and other emergency services, without having sustainable revenue sources to take you through those and without the capacity to borrow and all the things that you lack that keep you in a position where you can't actually be controlling your own destiny. So that's obviously a seminal point, and I'm hoping that your council is addressing that as fundamentally as we need to have across the country, that we have to have a different kind of arrangement in terms of how we resource municipal governments. And you know all about urban development agreements. You know what the pros and cons are of those. And are there other models that we should be considering to make sure that municipal governments, that, as I suggested, provide the bulk of the essential services that most Canadians count on, that they need to have different kinds of revenue tools. The second thing is this notion of bringing back Main Street. Because you're the level of government closest to the people, you are you don't have a bird's eye view. You have a ground street level view of what the challenges are to make neighborhoods safe, to make them sustainable, to make them productive, economically viable, and all the things that we know that Main Streets were struggling before COVID. We think now this is a time for us to really come to terms with that and determine, are our Main Streets not just about jobs and not just about small business, they're also about public safety, they're about vibrancy, they're about equity, they're about the whole fabric of urban life is dependent on our shared public spaces, of which streets are the large majority of the allocation. So all the things that you will have to lead, municipal governments will have to lead those other levels, also known as senior levels, at the province and the feds, to understand that the recovery of the country is going to pivot on how you see Main Street economies recover. So one of the things that I think you should look at is, and it's mentioned in a couple of the other presentations, is alternate forms of financial support for Main Street businesses. And that may mean we may have to really rethink property tax. We may have to think about graduated property tax and different ways of, that then speaks to the other point I made, which is that you need different ways to fund your budget. So to take the pressure off the property tax, which may mean that you're going to reduce the property tax for businesses coming on main streets because of all the other social benefits that those businesses provide. Similarly, in your building permit process, you may start to want to consider, as you navigate development permits, that you actually designate what the nature of those ground street tenancies need to look like. And does that mean alternate forms of capitalization for that developer to be able to make the numbers work so that those main streets could be occupied by independent businesses? Because as we know, what generally happens, the developers will say they've got to have Class A tenants to be able to meet the fiduciary requirements of their financing. So that's a significant disruption that you could, as a local council, I believe, get really ambitious and creative about. Similarly, new forms, new ownership models, BC has led this historically over the years. More co-ops, more land trusts, more kinds of, one of my fellow presenters is going to speak to this, about whether or not you need designation so that not-for-profits can become the anchor tenant who then does subleases to local businesses. Similarly, where are you with working with faith institutions, which are all often on main streets, as are institutional organizations like universities or colleges, as well as churches, that have the traffic that is generated by the people that work in those buildings, including your own buildings, including the municipal buildings and the provincial buildings, the federal buildings. The Main Street economic livelihood is largely dependent on those kinds of workers who are attached to those tenancies. So what does that mean? Does that mean different kinds of incentives that you have to provide? Similarly, again, I think someone else was going to mention this procurement. You can do an enormous amount by starting to earmark and target, as the law will allow you to particular kinds of procurement policies that favor small businesses. It's difficult. There's a gazillion excuses of why governments tell us they can't do this, but I think you could be brave and look for really interesting workarounds that would generate more sustainable revenues for those small businesses looking to recover. Like who's providing the food for your shelters? Who's providing all the necessary other food services? Can those go to local businesses? And then the last thing I'm going to say is that I don't want us to, at Bring Back Main Street, we're running a campaign with a whole bunch of partners, including our colleagues who presented before we did at the CFIB and the Chambers of Commerce, as I suggested. We've also got the architects and the planners engaged in a Main Street design challenge to look at the ways in which how we're designing and the amenities that we're putting onto Main Streets are an important driver of the livability of that area and the economic viability. So I think it has to be a kind of hearkening. You folks have the leverage to do this through all the different mechanisms that local governments have. You've got the opportunity to emphasize the quality of the built environment and how that affects the economic performance and the social resilience of your neighborhoods to make the complete communities you want. Thanks for asking me. You're not alone in this. Obviously, there are cities across the country that are struggling with this, but people look to Vancouver, particularly because you have pockets of unique business, like your Chinatown, for instance. You have unique evidence of really vibrant local community sectors and independent sectors, and the rest of the country will be watching to see how you can help support these as they emerge. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mary, and we'll ask you to also stand by for questions after our final presentation.
Sure.
Thanks. And our last guest speaker is Amy Robinson, founder and executive director of Loco BC. And I understand that Amy also has a PowerPoint presentation that will be up on the screen. And Amy, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Do you want me to present from my screen as well, or?
I believe that the clerk has it up in the chambers, but
okay.
Because the clerk is in the chambers, I'll ask the clerk to respond. Thanks.
Yes, this is the clerk. If you can share your screen, that is how we've been proceeding.
Okay. And so I need to click on content. Oops, wrong one. There we go. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me. I'm Amy Robinson with Loco BC. And just to give you a little bit of a sense of our work, for those of you who don't know us, we do research on the impacts of independent business in the province. Some of that work has been around the power of purchasing, mostly related to the potential to leverage government and institutional purchasing, but also business purchasing to support the benefits that independent businesses bring to our communities. We did a recent study on the impact of retail and restaurant purchasing at the consumer level that was just released in 2019. I'll give you some of the results later on in my presentation. And we also look at the impact of buy local campaigns and challenges for BC businesses. And sometimes that, when we survey businesses, they tell us what some of their biggest issues are, and we try to look at is there some kind of response that we can help work on. So businesses told us a number of years ago that e-commerce was a big deal, and that local retailers weren't able to compete. And so we have been working through our Buy Local campaign to create a digital platform for them to have a presence. We have been pounding the digital adoption message with small businesses for many, many years through that program, and have worked on empty storefronts and affordable leasing issues with the Downtown Vancouver BIA. And most recently produced a report that's just being released this week. Mayor and Council have a copy that I sent last week to you all, but it won't be released till the media until Friday, on the high cost of permitting delays in the City of Vancouver. So we sometimes work on improving the enabling environment to improve opportunities for small businesses, and this certainly in the City of Vancouver has been brought to our attention many, many times as an impediment to doing business. And so we wanted to look at this, and I'll give you some of the results in a minute. And then in terms of education and advocacy, we've certainly been advocating for local government and business purchasing for many years, and then have launched a Buy Local campaign, which is more of a consumer advocacy campaign. It's BC Buy Local. We work with many partners across the province on that, tend to work with other business groups like chambers and business improvement area associations, economic development groups, buy local groups, to get the message out to the consumers, mostly the first week in December ahead of consumer shopping frenzy, but throughout the year increasingly with partners in different geographic areas. And then in terms of reopening, we really thought it was important to leverage the awareness that seemed to be out there around the importance of independent business and how consumers were much more closer to understanding that if they didn't spend their money with the businesses they loved in their communities, that they would disappear. And so have been collaborating with the business associations of BC, have an Reopen with Care program that we all worked on, and LOCO has put its own spin on it and sent that out to our partners. So we're all sort of using the same messages and materials. So I had similar thoughts to some of the other presenters that, recovery to what? And I was glad to see in the notes framing this discussion that we need a newer, a better system, because the current system concentrates wealth into the hands of a very few. And most City of Vancouver residents have fairly low average annual household incomes, considering the high cost of living here. And there are many other indicators of inequity produced by sort of the before COVID economy. So I'm hoping that we can recover to something that is different, and I'm hoping that it will be more local, green, and just. Those are the things that are important to me. And why local is important, these are some of the results from our research that came out in December 2019. And we look at this is mostly around the economic side of spending at local businesses, and this is consumer spending again, compared to spending in multinationals. And BC businesses, when we spend money with them, they recirculate that revenue more than 4.6 times in the local economy. And so that keeps 63% of every dollar local, compared to $14 when it's spent with multinationals. So it's a significant economic benefit, and it's more important now than ever that that recirculation keeps money in the economy, creating local jobs and sending profits to owners, sending money to local charities. Local businesses, they spend 31% of their revenue on local supplies, so either products that are made here that go into their inventory, or services like banking and graphic design and bookkeeping and things like that. So that keeps money circulating in the economy. It produces a lot of jobs. The profits, as I mentioned, are reinvested locally, and local businesses also spend 25 times more per dollar of revenue on local charitable giving, local charities and causes than do multinationals. So we calculated it out that a 10% shift in local spending would help create 14,150 jobs and keep $4.3 billion in the BC economy. So it's nothing to sniff at. Not every business will survive this pandemic. And so I think we need to think about how to focus resources on local businesses, and partly because of the employment and revenue that they create. So our research found that independent businesses produce up to 8.4 times more jobs per square foot than multinationals, and also that they produce 8.1 times more revenue per square foot than multinationals. So revenue is important because of that recirculation effect. It actually impacts not just the business itself, but also the ability to spend with other organizations in the local economy, creating that positive feedback loop. So not every local business contributes the same amount of impact. And so our research, the economic piece, looks at these, we call it the 5 Ps. These 4 Ps that are all in blue are mostly the economic impact. So they provide a good measure of the economic impact of a business, and that's where the profits go. where the payroll is, where the purchasing is, and where the philanthropy is. So that's the outcome of our study, and that's where that 4.6 times comes. I also want to include the practices aspect. This is the social and environmental aspect of a business. We don't have a great measure when we use our tool, but we do like to ask businesses what they're proud of on the social and environmental side, and then if they want to do more, have a more robust measure of what they're doing, we encourage them to do the B Corp Quick Impact Assessment.
Madam Chair, excuse me, just one moment.
I was just going to take a moment. I'm so sorry to interrupt there. Yes, Councillor Carr, did you have a motion to extend the meeting?
I do. I know our meeting is going to end abruptly, so if I could move to extend our meeting by 1 hour.
We have a motion on the floor, Council. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move us to a different queue, and Councillor Carr, you'd like to go on the queue, and I'm so sorry, but this is an important part of the procedure.
I'll second that, Councillor Kirby.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kirby-Young. And is there any discussion? I've put up a queue, Council. If there is, put yourself on it. We do need to make sure we have quorum, and for this to pass, we would need a 2/3 vote to extend the meeting. Just want to remind Council.
Madam Chair, I can't access the queue. It's the mayor here.
Yes.
And I just on a privilege or just on the discussion is I actually have to leave, and I'd like to leave for a 3 o'clock appointment, but I would like to leave before the vote so I don't influence the decision of council. So I'll just excuse myself now, and please mark me absent for the vote on the extension. And thanks to all the presenters. It was very, very interesting, and thank you very much for all your input, and thanks to council for doing these.
Thanks for letting us know, and we won't be calling you then, waiting for you to vote. I'll ask the clerk to mark you as absent. Thanks, Mayor Stewart. And I see Councillor Carr, are you finished? Can I?
Yeah.
Councillor Boyle on the queue. Councillor Boyle? Thanks. Sorry. Yes, you're not on the queue, but I will put you on the queue. But go ahead, please.
Thanks, Chair DeGenevan. I also just wanted to say, due to childcare parenting responsibilities, I can't stay beyond 3 to 2, but we'll look forward to reviewing the notes, and also really appreciate the speakers we've had today.
Thanks so much, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Swanson. Councillor Swanson, I see you on the queue. Did you want to speak to this? Is your microphone unmuted?
Madam Chair, I believe Councillor Swanson and myself, Councillor Carr, were on the list for questions at the end of the speakers.
Oh, I actually moved us to a brand new queue, Councillor Carr, but Councillor Swanson, we're going to vote on this now, if that's all right with everyone, unless I'll just give Councillor Swanson one more moment. Just want to make sure if she wants to say something to this also, that she... Councillor Swanson? Okay. Council, I'll move us to the vote, and hoping that Councillor Swanson will be able to vote on screen. If not, we'll have to try and contact Councillor Swanson. So please, maybe what we'll do, Council, is I'm just going to do a yay, or I'm going to ask for yays and nays, and if we have any nays, we'll have to record that. But all in favor of extending the meeting until 4 p.m., as per the motion moved by Councillor Carr.
Yay.
Everyone in favor say yay, please.
Yay.
Any opposed say nay. Great. Seeing that passed unanimously, we will move on. We will continue, and I apologize very much, Amy, for having to interrupt you, but if not, we couldn't continue our meeting. So please go ahead.
No problem. I understand. Can you still see my screen?
I cannot at this point, but I will.
I can.
Okay, let me try to reshare just to make sure it's working.
It is visible.
Okay. On my screen, it went off and on, so I'm going to do it again.
It's visible for me as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think it's back. So we have a tool that we use to measure the impact of local businesses called the Community Impact Assessment, and this is just one example of how we created a little bit of an infographic on their purchasing impact, employment, and other aspects. During the COVID crisis, it became apparent how important local businesses and local supply chains are to maintaining complete communities. And, I was thinking about how the City of Vancouver could encourage and maintain these communities to support them. And I think one has been mentioned, it's through purchasing. Another is through land use decisions, and another is by reducing red tape. So I'm going to focus on a couple of these. In terms of purchasing, I agree that the City of Vancouver could look to its own local purchasing, and there are many barriers that have been stated over the years. But there are ways that that municipalities are helping to support small and local businesses and social enterprises through their purchasing policies, and I encourage you to take a look at what's being done, how it's being implemented at the city, and what more can be done within those the trade and other restrictions. I think also to support local purchasing by residents, it's important to ensure that we continue to locate small businesses in our communities. Consumers shop at the businesses that we locate in their communities, and that's the climate action goal is really around complete communities and allowing people to have walkable neighborhoods where they can access all their goods and services they need for their daily needs. So I think these two things are inextricably linked. If we stop locating those businesses that provide a diversity of services and products, and have a lot of bigger multinational chains and communities, that we're going to move away from meeting that very goal. I'm also going to focus for the rest of the presentation, though, on land use opportunities and red tape reduction. So currently, in terms of industries and local businesses, it's not great. And this is even pre-COVID. We had lost in the last 30 years in Vancouver many hectares of industrial space to other uses. And a great report that was done by the Vancouver Economic Commission in 2018 on industrial insights found that there was a threat of losing jobs and revenue and wages if businesses who were planning to leave left in the next several years. So this threatens our local manufacturing and the security of our supply chains that became apparent during the COVID crisis. In terms of retail, pre-COVID, we all know that the situation wasn't good. Online shopping was having an impact. Forms of development definitely, and taxation were impacting independent businesses. LOCA's research showed that we were losing in BC more than 1% of independent retailers every year. They were losing that market share. And a couple of reports that have been done recently. One was as recently as presented to Council in February. A quick snapshot of a report done on retail in the City of Vancouver found that many neighborhoods had above a healthy limit of empty storefronts, and that there has been a move in the last decade towards chains from independents. Another study that was done on a large section of Main Street in 2017 found that between those 2007 and 2016, that chain or formula stores had increased by 74%, while independents had shrunk by 6.5%. And that chains more often occupied new spaces in mixed-use developments. So part of the issue is, in terms of land use decisions, is that current densification practices in the City of Vancouver tend to favor ripping out old buildings along commercial corridors, and those are more often than not occupied by independent businesses. And then when new mixed developments are put up, they are most often occupied by chains. So that land use practice is problematic for the displacement of independent businesses and the fact that they don't return. High business taxes have been mentioned already as part of the problem. However, I want to acknowledge that this council has voted to support a tax shift, lightening the burden on businesses in the City of Vancouver, which we much appreciate. And then the classification at highest and best use has been a problem for many, many years, and so encourage the city to continue lobbying and working with the province to bring something to fruition on this issue. So there's a great report produced by the Institute for Local Self-Reliance on municipal strategies for affordable commercial spaces. I think that this is one thing that the city can, in one way, the city has control and can help use some of the tools at its disposal to make sure that we continue to protect and build commercial spaces that are affordable for independent businesses. So I've listed a few of them here. These are some of the strategies that the City of Vancouver can consider. And it could consider the purchase of commercial spaces in mixed-use development. So rather than lease, purchase, opportunities for businesses to purchase. And then there's much more stability in the local market when businesses own their spaces. They could also encourage community land trusts and other creative ways to improve community ownership. Co-ops were also mentioned. The city could also facilitate the building of affordable spaces using community benefits agreements or other tools. And I have some examples of, I'm just going to blow through them, but just so you have them in your deck, I wanted to make sure that you had examples of where these things are being done elsewhere, because it is being done elsewhere, nowhere in Canada that I know of. But here's some examples of other cities who are doing affordable commercial spaces initiatives. And what I think is important about this is that Boulder in particular looked at, they were already doing affordable housing, which we know is in crisis and is a big issue. But one of my struggles with it is that if we build affordable housing and we don't look at what, if it's mixed use and we don't look at what goes on the ground floor, then we're perpetuating this issue. And so in Boulder, they saw that was happening, and so they wanted to bring their affordable housing and their affordable commercial space strategies together. They wanted to mitigate the impact of rising rents on local businesses and protect community character. And so they put out an RFP on city-owned property to try to figure out what are ideas to protect, to build affordable commercial spaces for local businesses or not-for-profit organizations. And just this year, they're breaking ground on the first development. It's called 30 Pearl Development, and half of the almost 10,000 square foot commercial space will be offered out at below market rents and have annual rent increases that are no more the rate of inflation. Also, Portland has a affordable commercial tenanting program. It's actually run by the city's economic development agency, Prosper Portland. And businesses who are owned by underrepresented groups that meet certain neighborhood needs can lease space at 2 locations for below market rents. New York City also has several programs underway. One is a tax break for long-term leases. So landlords that offer long-term leases to small businesses in Manhattan can get a tax break on their commercial rent tax, the CRT. And they're also piloting a retail preservation zone where they have set-asides. So that set-asides for local businesses is one of those strategies in that report I mentioned, to local businesses at below market rates for projects that are of a certain scale. And as of June 2017, developers had set aside 20% of ground floor retail space and had set initial rents at 30% below market rate. Also, I think there's an opportunity to look at, I'm going to mention permitting and licensing in a minute, but the development process itself. In Phoenix, they have a pretty interesting program, adaptive reuse, and they have several municipalities in the U.S. have adaptive reuse programs. Phoenix is award-winning, and it's basically helping to adapt older buildings for new business uses. Right now, what's happening in Vancouver is we either tear it down and build a new space, which is, as I mentioned, most often likely to be occupied by a chain or formula retail store or restaurant, or the tenant is expected to pay for all the upgrades, which is providing an increasing burden, not only in terms of construction costs, but permitting for an independent business, which does not own the space and will not benefit from that improvement in the long term. There's a disincentive for many businesses to invest in that kind of upgrade for an older building and bring it up to code, because often they might have a demolition clause, or they might just know that that area, the community plan in that area, it allows that building to be built to a certain height that the building is not at now. And so the adaptive reuse program would allow businesses to be used. They would have maybe less of a burden on the upgrades, but it helps provide development guidelines and streamline those processes and get businesses into old buildings quicker. In Phoenix, they actually provide, they reduce the time frame for permits, so that itself helps save costs for the business. And they also provide up to $7,000 in fee incentives. So it actually, it's kind of a full service program. It's fostered the start of many new businesses and created jobs. The first 9 developers to use the program saved an average of 4.5 months off of the regular permit process and more than $16,000. So I'm recommending that we have flexibility in zoning, permitting, and licensing. In recent months, we've seen how quickly things can change and how permitting and licensing can move online in a way that it hasn't in previous decades. How responsive municipalities can be to business and community needs when it becomes how apparent how desperate it is for them to make revenue. And so I would love to see that continued and amplified in the recovery and beyond. And so one of the things is to reduce the time of the existing permitting and licensing process, to have more flexibility in zoning, permitting, and licensing, and then to continue that responsiveness to the business and community needs. I'm going to skip through these slides because it's not public yet, and so I'm hoping the clerk will do the same, but I'll discuss it. We have a report that is being released to the public on Friday of this week, and we worked with several partners, BOMA BC, the Downtown Vancouver BIA, the BIA Partnership in Vancouver, and Blueprint, to address the cost of commercial permit and license delays in the city of Vancouver. And what we found is that the average economic loss per business per permit or license is almost $750,000. And so when you think about how to stimulate the economy, if we could quicken the process, then those losses would be minimized. Right now, what we found was that, and this is historic data because things have changed, and I want to acknowledge that, the city staff has really done a great job during COVID and under the new leadership in DBL to speed things up for all businesses. But this was launched last June, and our report was finalized in March of this year, so it's sort of pre-COVID times. Keep that in mind. But what it represents is that during the 8.2 months on average, we found that it takes from the submission of a permit or license until that permit or license is granted to the business, that the losses in terms of revenue are almost $500,000 to the average business, and that they also are paying almost $40,000 in leasing costs during that time. So that's to the business itself. And then the loss to the local economy that's included in that larger figure is that, during that 8.2 months, if we could shorten that, then employment could be generated, then sales could be generated to other businesses in that business's local supply chain. And so we found that over $100,000 is lost in employment and about a similar amount in lost sales to local suppliers. So that's a huge amount of money, and we're recognizing that the city is making strides to reduce that, and yet there's still work to be done. And so we're hoping that the responsiveness and particularly to small businesses that's happened during the COVID crisis can continue. And we're working with city staff, have been working throughout the project to keep up to date on what's happening, and feel we're hearing from our partners as well that things are getting better. So another thing is related to the permitting and licensing is to try to remove red tape for the very businesses that we are trying to encourage in the city, the greenest businesses. So our study mostly looked at storefronts, but didn't look at business to business or any kind of anything that we really couldn't create an average around. But the greenest businesses are having trouble because, if they try to implement alternative energy systems or anything like that, these new regulations at the city are quite cumbersome for businesses to navigate. So I encourage the city to look at how can we remove, while we're streamlining the licensing and permitting process, how can we remove barriers? How can we talk to businesses about how these things are actually implemented and reduce the time it takes for them to go through the process? So removing disincentives is important. And then I think, providing incentives for B Corps, other businesses who B Corps are actually, it's a third-party certification of a sustainable business. And cities like Philadelphia are providing business tax credits for registered B Corps. And other municipalities like San Francisco and LA have supplier preferences for B Corps. So if we want to encourage those kinds of businesses, the greener businesses, to thrive, we have to look at removing disincentives and providing incentives. So in terms, as I mentioned, in terms of the COVID crisis and the new head of DBL, the City of Vancouver's made progress on some of these issues. Electronic submission of documents has been amazing. I know the community has been asking for that for a long time. There's reduced time for the intake. I heard yesterday from the head of DBL that they've removed what used to take a couple of weeks is now taking a couple of days. And then the expedited patio permits has really been huge for the restaurant industry. But there's still a couple of key issues that we're hearing. Sprinkler permits are one thing that businesses have to wait until the end of the other permit process to apply, and that it sometimes is still taking a long time. The industry is unclear about whether or not demising walls are still requiring permits and triggering other upgrades. A demising wall, for the rest of you who don't know, I didn't know before I started this project, is a non-load bearing wall that's just used to separate spaces. So when you build one or tear one down, it used to trigger upgrades. Still not clear whether that does. And then digitizing city records. So these are just a few of the things that we would love to see further work on. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much. And again, apologies for that interruption so that we could make sure we heard the rest of your presentation. Council, are there any questions to the guest speakers? We've all waited patiently, and I thank them for that. I'm looking to you, and Council, I want to apologize. I cleared the queue when we were going on for discussion and debate about extending the meeting. So the clerk and I had conferred, and we had added everyone in the order that we'd seen you. So if I've missed you, please add yourself back to the queue, or you can always, through a point of privilege, address Council, and we'll make sure that you have an opportunity to ask questions as well. So the first question, I'm going to suggest, as I've noted before, we have 5 minutes of questions each. So if you could direct your questions, knowing that you have 5 minutes to ask them and have them answered, Council, that would be great. Starting with Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Could you reset my timer for me, because I haven't started yet?
I was just going to do that.
Thank you.
Oh, just a moment. There we go. Go ahead.
Okay, so many questions. I'll try to focus, and huge thanks to all the presenters. My first question is for Local BC, working backwards, and really struck by, I really appreciate it always when you do surveys. I think they always present really compelling stats, and very struck by the remove red tape and the cost of, the actual just dollar economic cost of that delay in terms of 8.2 months. So if you had to prioritize all the different suggestions that we've heard from different speakers today and what you've brought forward, would you say this is one of the singular most important ones? And do you see COVID as actually being an opportunity for us to rethink how we do business and how we support our small business in the city?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. We've done a couple of consulting projects for the City of Vancouver in the last several years. One was around legacy businesses in Chinatown. The second was around protecting heritage businesses in the Punjabi market area and the retail study there. And this has been one of our recommendations over and over and over. And so I see COVID as an opportunity where, things that seemed impossible pre-COVID were made to happen in short order. So, I absolutely see this as an opportunity and would love to see the momentum maintained. And I think, I was going to say in order of priority, because there's going to be a lot of options for council on the table. If we have to choose, do you think this would be a strategy that would do the most good for the most? Well, if we have to sort of start, where do we start and direct resources to first? Absolutely. I think the cost is staggering, the cost in terms of not just the cost to local businesses, but the cost to the local economy. And so I think that not only new applications, but those that are already in the system who have been waiting sometimes for years to have their permits or licenses processed, we need to look at how to speed that up, because that's why we wanted to do this study, was to prove what we knew from businesses, that it was having a huge impact. Okay, I'm going to keep moving for time because I'm limited for time. The other piece was really on sort of incenting commercial space and reduced commercial space, and you mentioned the examples from other cities, and council did have a motion on industrial lands that was approved, and we're awaiting. Part of that motion was to do a pilot on affordable commercial space and utilization of city land. Great. So again, do you think that that's similar to sort of how we incent to provide land for nonprofit housing, or try to look at it as a community amenity? Would you also prioritize Absolutely. That? Yeah, I think it needs to be part of community benefits agreements. I think it is a bit of a longer, like a more midterm in terms of recovery, but because those things will need to be built and occupied, and that's a ways down the road, but I do think it's hugely important. Okay, thanks. I'm going to switch over to Small Business BC, if I could ask those folks. And it was with regards to, and I know I've had lots of conversations, I know a lot of councillors have, with regards to utilization of empty retail for pop-up spaces, whether it's arts, culture, local entrepreneurs. I wonder if you can provide any insight as to how you sort of get buy-in from landlords in that, and how you bring them in from a policy or a sort of a structure perspective that may be reluctant from either a sort of a liability perspective or an economic perspective, if those spaces are, even though they're empty. Any comments on that?
This is Tom Conway, and I'll let Sarah add if she has anything. Unfortunately, I don't think I have any data or any surveys that would support or deny the ability to be able to do that and what landlords are looking for, or business owners. Okay. I was just interested to know if you were aware of it, and if you have any information you want to follow up and send it to council, that would be great. Just curious how you get the landlords engaged in that, because I think certainly there's interest from my point of view, and it makes sense. It's better for communities not to have empty space, obviously. Definitely. Okay. My other question is really in terms of for CFIB, I think it was, that had made reference, and the number of things that we are doing now, split tax assessment and others. But in talking about rebuilding the local economy and women and youth being particularly hard hit, and I wonder if you could provide any more specificity around strategies that could be adopted to support those sectors that have been particularly vulnerable.
Hi, Muriel here from CFIB. Thank you for your question. With our survey data that we issue, we do have a lot of information specific on property taxes in terms of doing data breakouts. In speaking with our research team, that's absolutely something that I can communicate with them and see if we can get you more specific data to get those specific targets, breakouts for those. If that's something you're interested in, we'd be happy to pursue that and provide you with that information.
That would be super. Thank you. I think that's my time, so I have to leave it there, sadly.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Kirby-Young. Right within your time, Councillor Swanson. Up to 5 minutes.
Can you hear me?
We can. Thanks so much, Councillor Swanson.
Call Ripley's. I have two questions, one for Mr. Lee and one for Ms. Rowe. So the first one for Mr. Lee is, with the tourism industry taking such a big hit now, do you know of any hotels that would be available for governments to lease for people who are homeless?
I know that city has been in contact with the hotel associations. So the BC Hotel Association will be a group that I think the city can obviously reach out to. And the other one is sort of the more local, the Hotel Association of Vancouver. They would be the folks that you want to get in contact with.
Okay, thank you. Mary Rowe, you were talking about a graduated property tax, which I campaigned on the idea of a mansion tax, which is basically a graduated property tax. Were you talking about it just for business or business and residential? And do any municipalities in Canada that you know have them, or are we all relying on the province to give us that power to have graduated property taxes?
Hi, Jean. Nice to see you twice in a day.
Yeah, and also, are there any creative ways for a municipality to implement a progressive property tax without provincial approval?
Yeah, this is the dilemma, right? I mean, first of all, I was thinking, I think you, as you suggest, it's part of a larger discourse about whether you want to do graduated property taxes for other uses. But I was specifically thinking that if you look at what Barcelona has had to do, it has had to alter completely the taxation structure because it was losing all its Main Street businesses, which were driving tourism and all sorts of things. So to my knowledge, there is nobody doing this, perhaps from low better, but I think there is in Canada. It's certainly that the local self-reliance is advocating for time. Is there wiggle room for you to do it? No, we all need provincial approval to alter municipal provincial tax rates, which is why the highest and best use thing is such a critical issue that we have to win. And it's a hard thing because the jurisdictions just blame each other. I know this from my previous life, where I happened to be in a premier's office, and the Ministry of Finance and the province was convinced that the city could do it, and the city was convinced that the province could do it. So it's not an easy fix. So I don't think it's been done anywhere before. The only thing you could, I suppose, do is you could consider a different kind of levy. But that would mean you would add something. So in other words, all you would do is create an advantage for an independent business because you wouldn't charge it to them. So I don't think it's a good solution. But what about my colleague, I don't know your name, I'm sorry, from Local. What do you think? We lost her?
Sorry, I was just muting myself. I agree. I've heard the same thing, the back and forth between the province and the city. I think we need to win with the province, and I wish I had examples of it being done successfully elsewhere.
I was wondering if the city could do something like ICBC does, which says you get your bill and it says you're being charged $1,500, but a year, but you're a road star, so you only have to pay $1,000 or something like that. If we could do that with taxes.
Like I said, I wonder if you could give a tax break to those who rented to independent businesses long term. But again, you get into this issue that we got into with the rent relief for businesses, that you're relying on the landlord to pass those things on. Another program's given grants to similar landlords that rent to independent businesses long-term in San Francisco. But again, it's not the business itself, it's through the landlord, which I think is a bit problematic.
The one jurisdiction that probably is further on this than any would be in Quebec and Montreal, where they have a very strong local business sector. So, and where there's a deliberate commitment to the social economy. So it may be that staff may want to reach out to their colleagues in the city of Montreal to see and in Quebec City for that matter, to see if they've got tools that they've been able to persuade the government of Quebec to let them employ.
Okay, thank you so much. That's it.
Thanks so much, Councillor Swanson. Councillor Carr.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much. I think I'll just continue with questions to Mary Rowe, if that's possible first. Rowe, you mentioned that Canadian cities provide the most services of any level of government to Canadian residents, and we need different revenue tools. Can you suggest to us what you would prioritize as new revenue tools for Vancouver, and especially if there are any of the revenue tools that you would suggest for us that are in place somewhere else and are effective in those cities in Canada?
Yes, sadly, they're not. I mean, there are very, very small increments So in some provinces, municipalities get a share of a retail sales tax in some provinces, but it's very small. And we know that the gas tax, which is a misnamed levy, has been the sort of default for 17 or 18 years. The question is whether nationally, and I'm sorry that Mayor Stewart's gone because he's part of the national advocacy for this, the question is whether nationally we're going to be able to persuade this particular federal government to consider a share of a growth tax, like a point off the HST. And it may be that under the circumstances of COVID, you'll have the best shot you've ever had because of the extraordinary expense that you've had to incur to deal with the emergency. So that would be, so what you want are growth taxes. The second question would be, can you work with your provincial governments? And again, your provincial government may be one of the more amenable to this, about some kind of sharing of a consumption tax, a sales tax. So these are the kinds of tools that they're not popular, but the question would be whether we have a moment here coming out of this extraordinary challenge where there's going to be an acceptance that you want to find the most progressive and equitable way to create more public resources, and property tax is regressive and inhibiting of small and independent businesses and minority-owned businesses, et cetera. And so the fairest way is to go to an income tax or a growth tax of some kind.
I'm wondering if subsequent to this meeting, because we will be developing recommendations by the end of July, this particular committee, which is a committee of the whole of council, and it will include our recommendations on we as a city, what we can do, and as well what we can advocate for. And I'm wondering if follow-up to this meeting, you could possibly send to council some suggestions as to the particular tax or other revenue sources that other municipalities across Canada may also be pursuing.
Yeah, sure.
Great, awesome. Thank you. My next question is for Meg O'Shea from the Vancouver Economic Commission. Ms. O'Shea, you talked about a locally connected economy as being more resilient. Could you define for me what you mean by locally connected? Is it geographic, like within Vancouver or within Metro Vancouver, or non-geographic, or both?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. We found during the last 3 months of rapid adjustment in our business community that one of the strengths coming forward was we're using the term relocalization of supply chain. So when international shipments slowed, for example, and also as new commodities took on greater significance, such as personal protective equipment, the local supply the local manufacturers and others, food producers and distributors, stepped up and sort of stepped in a local sense. I absolutely would want to think regionally about the zone, because our breadbasket is well outside of the city, but I do also want to emphasize that there is much opportunity to grow local supply chain within the city of Vancouver by promoting smaller sites. So more distributed urban agriculture, for example, that can be bought directly from the food producers that is growing in an urban site. I think the main point here is that Vancouver is actually quite a small market, and we have our CMA that we can draw from, and goods, people cross those boundaries at all times, and we should be looking to strong collaboration across the region in order to strengthen local supply chains, not in the absence of international supply, but to complement.
Okay, that's great. Actually, my second question was going to be exactly on the local resilience of our local food system, and if I'm wondering also in follow-up to this meeting if you might be able to provide all of us on council with some very specific suggestions around how we may move within our jurisdiction on creating a more resilient local food system.
And that's for 5 minutes. But I suppose that's a question. Yes, no, if you can.
No, that was if she could, yes.
Okay.
We can, and we will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Councillor Carr, I was trying to help you to get that answer there. Councillor Wiebe, questions to speaker?
Yeah, my first one is a follow-up to Meg O'Shea from the VC, and that's on what are we doing to kind of change our procurement rules and promote that local production and local supply, recognizing we have difficult procurement rules as a public body, and also with the fair trade regulations that are in place. So what are we doing to kind of promote that local procurement to ensure that we're supporting our local manufacturers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add on, what can we do more of? So City of Vancouver, like all cities, are bound by national and international trade agreements. And so it is very challenging to suggest that you place a local first procurement tactic. Sorry, losing my language. But you can adapt and move in other directions. The community benefit agreement, I think, is a terrific example of how you're enabling local economic activity through the development that will continue apace in Vancouver. And I'd love to see that expanded. I think Alicia from Exchange Intercity had some really good suggestions of where that could expand in order to influence social hiring, local hiring, and of course, local procurement. Pre-procurement is also an option. Reflecting on our industrial lands affordability crisis, protecting those lands in order that many of those goods and produce and food items can be actually produced here. They could be then sold potentially at a lower cost because of lower transportation needs. So there are a lot of different directions to take this in. The City of Vancouver is already stepping up in terms of the CBA, and I know for a fact that your procurement office is actually very advanced at looking at social procurement in particular. You have the ethical and sustainable procurement officers embedded there, and they're doing some very good work, but we'd like to help you push it further as we can.
Okay, thanks for that. The next one is obviously this new business environment that we're in today. We're seeing every type of business adapting and creating different side hustles and opportunities to bringing in revenue sources that don't normally fit under our zoning or bylaws. So I'm just wondering if anyone has kind of advice on how we can adapt as a city to better reflect the business environment that's out there, including restaurants making their own beef jerky and selling them, or bookstores also bringing in different things that they would sell, or having nights with a glass of wine. So just reflecting that home-based businesses want to be able to have guests over to be able to sell some of their products. So we're seeing such a different change in how business operates. It doesn't really fit under our current guidelines. So I'm just wondering if anyone has any advice on where we could go moving forward to be a little more adaptive as a city to support these businesses and their success.
May I respond, Madam Chair? Mary?
Of course, yes.
All right.
Sorry, I was on mute. Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, Councillor, I think one of the key things that we're going to watch now is that whether or not your local business community will actually be boosted by the fact that more people are going to be working from home. So whether we'll be working from home the full 5-day work week, or we'll be working from home 3 days and into an office 2 days, that one of the ways is to start to look at the amenities that you need to have in local neighborhoods and look at this very organically. What do you need? You look at your commercial corridors, you look at the areas where there's most people are living, where are the densest areas, and then start to look at what are the amenities that are lacking there that the city could be investing in. So does that mean different kinds of essential services, like shared services, so that you could go and get some printing services or whatever it is you might require, because people do need to get out of their house, and now they're going to come out for lunch. So it may mean, whereas before they were downtown for lunch. So I think that training your eyes now to what do you need to do, just as your topic was here, to make more complete communities and make more of them, so that you've got a broader mix of amenities in local communities, so that people working from home have the supports and the resources closer to hand.
If I may, Madam Chair, Muriel Protzer from CFIB, I'd like to add something.
It's up to Councillor Wiebe. It's his time. Councillor Wiebe, is that okay?
That is fine.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd just like to expand on one of our recommendations to expand Vancouver's Small Business Commercial Renovation Center. It's already a great resource for businesses who are wanting to renovate their premise, and I truly believe that this service could be expanded to help businesses with additional tasks such as permit applications, such as wanting to expand their business and take on new initiatives and side hustles, as you said. And I think it would be a really great resource for the city to also collect feedback from small businesses in terms of, okay, well, how are they evolving, and what kind of additional things would they like to offer, and how can the city best adapt and make suggestions on that?
This is Meg O'Shea. I'm very conscious of time, but I want to plug in that the Vancouver Economic Commission has been tracking some amendments that might be possible in terms of land use planning and zone permitting, so that we can bring those forward to you after this meeting as well.
thanks so much. And Councillor Weeb, that's your time, but I think there's been some offers to connect. And what I'll ask the Clerk Council is that perhaps there's a way to share information as to how to get in contact with the presenters if you have follow-up questions. Then if the clerk could send that around at some point, is that possible?
This is the clerk here. Yes, that is possible to send to council.
Great. And I don't see anyone else on the queue. I know that 5 minutes isn't a lot of time considering all of the presentations that we've had, but I understand, Council, we had agreed to extend the meeting, and that's what we've done. I also do understand that quorum is a question as to, do we have enough people for quorum? We do currently, but seeing no one else on the queue for questions, I would like to, just a moment. Okay, Council, if you do need to leave at any point in the meeting, I'll need you to advise the clerk of that because we are lean on quorum. So I just remind everyone of that. But now that we've gone through our questions to guest speaker, the next item that we have, item number 2, is report back, timeline, speakers, and process. And I understand this be for the CCRC prioritized topics to be presented at future committee meetings. We will begin with a presentation from the CCRC topic ranking subcommittee. But I do understand that one of those councillors was not able to stay. Councillor Boyle, Councillor Fry, and Councillor Kirby-Young. I'm not sure if Councillor Fry and Councillor Kirby-Young, you will be co-presenting.
Councillor Fry, were you going to do this one again? Do you want to speak to that?
I wasn't prepared to speak to it, but
okay. Well, maybe I can speak to it briefly, if that's okay. The working subgroup comprised of Councillor Fry, Boyle, and myself, and supported by the CCRC co-chairs and Councillor Liaisons, Councillor Carr, and Councillor Donato, have held a number of meetings with respect to plotting out the 5 core topics that were identified as priorities by Council, and with a view to planning those meetings in the order of the magnitude of priority that they were given during that input process from Council, hence the reason that we're starting today with economic recovery and complete communities. And then we have plotted out the following upcoming dates to facilitate that based on that order and with the practicality and consideration as well on speaker availability. And in order for Council to be able to provide input as a whole into speaker suggestions and invited delegations for the remaining sessions that the committee has, a form very ably put together by Councillor Fry, who did the technical heavy lifting, has been sent out to Council so that they may input their suggestions for specific speakers and delegations, and the committee will meet to tabulate and confirm those and facilitate the outreach to speakers. So that's, I think, a bit of an overview as to the process. We don't anticipate probably quite as full agendas for some of the upcoming sessions. This was a particularly significant topic and felt we really wanted to get a broad perspective. But the other ones that we have coming up include sessions, for example, on climate, housing, with a focus particularly on nonprofit and social, where we see the biggest need areas that we're not meeting in terms of some of our goals in the city, and the other topics that the Council had decided upon. So I'm happy to take any questions along with other members that were participating, but that is the sort of the overview of the process at this point.
Okay, I do see that Councillor Carr is on the queue. Councillor Carr, do you have questions?
No, I don't.
But are you prepared to move a motion?
I just wanted to let you know, Madam Chair. First of all, I was prepared to present as well, and I just wanted to alert council or to remind council that I did send an email on behalf of the 5 councillors who were working on this, the 3 on the topic ranking subcommittee and the 2 liaisons. So councillors Boyle, Fry, Kirby Young, and then myself and Dominato.
And then we actually have you next up, Councillor Carr, with Councillor Dominato.
It's actually, It's actually one presentation, Madam Chair. So if we can just combine it, it would be.
My apologies. That's the way that I had worked it out with the clerk and had approved the agenda. But that's fine with me. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that you and Councillor Dominato also knew that you are here in the agenda. But yes, I wasn't sure if there was any motion though to.
Yes, there is.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. So again, just to recap the point I made, that the 5 of us worked together. I sent a memo to all of council. You would have received that yesterday, and I sent it on behalf of the 5 of us. And it does outline for you in that email the speakers and topics as suggested by the 5 of us and based on the process so aptly outlined by Councillor Kirby Young. So just so it's on the public record, the order is in the order that we had prioritized as a full council due to a ranking system provided by Councillor Fry with, the next topics being new fiscal tools for the city, followed by municipal government role and responses, followed by housing and homelessness, and followed by recovery and the climate emergency. And I have 2 motions, and the reason we need 2 is that in order to accommodate the 5 topics that we prioritized as a council, we only had 4 dates, so we do need another date. And also, there's a wisdom involved in allowing us to set aside a date at the end for us to discuss and finalize the report that we are going to be preparing as part of our terms of reference. We have the obligation to prepare a report by the end of July. So that would mean adding another date for that. So
I would
my
suggest
first motion,
2 motions. I'll suggest 2 motions, and that was the breakdown of how this was organized. I'm sorry if there was a miscommunication there, Councillor Card, in sharing the meeting and conferring with the clerk. I understood that what we would be doing first is considering from Councillors Boyle, Fry, and Kirby Young the topic ranking, and that would be one motion. And then there may be a motion coming after the report from you and yourself and Councillor Dominato. So should we proceed with a motion on topic ranking first?
Yes, we can do that, and I have forwarded that to the clerk and to all of you on council. And the motion reads that council approve the schedule of topics and speakers for June and July meetings of the CCRC, that's Council COVID Recovery Committee, as presented, which is I've just done, subject to changes related to availability of speakers.
Okay. I've started a queue here, and I've got you on that queue, Councillor Carr. Seeing no one else on the queue, I will ask council that you.
Happy to second that, Madam Chair.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Councillor Kirby Young. And I see no one else on the queue. I'm going to call a vote on this. Please vote on screen, and the motion is up on your screens, and it's up on the screen in the chamber and the live stream. So please vote on screen, council. Okay, and I'll ask the clerk to bring up the vote, and that passes. I'll just ask them to bring it up on screen, as we had said here. And that passes with unanimous support.
Great. Thank you,
Thanks,
Madam
Council.
Chair.
Now over to you, Councillor Carr and Councillor Dominato. And the way that I had thought we'd break this down would be that you would report, and as you've mentioned, there might be some more dates that this committee may want to consider. Thank you.
Great. Yes, I already outlined the need for 2 more dates, and you have councillors placed in your calendars the reserve dates of June 26th and July 24th in order to accommodate the 5 meeting topics and a day for us to also, or a meeting for us to discuss our end of July report and agree to that. And Councillor Dominato may wish to add more comments, but I think that it's been covered by Councillor Kirby-Young and myself from my point of view, the cogent information, but I leave it to Councillor Dominato to decide whether she would like to add anything to that.
Councillor Dominato, I did have you here as co-presenting.
I have nothing further, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. Are there any questions from the committee to our liaisons, Councillor Carr and Councillor Dominato? Okay, seeing none.
I have a motion.
Yes, my apologies. Yes. I see the city manager has. Yes, Mr. Johnston.
Thanks. I guess I sent an email around expressing my concerns about additional meetings with a list of the currently scheduled public hearings and council meetings and committee meetings for July. And I guess I just wanted to indicate we don't have the staff resources in clerks to support additional meetings at this time. We're already down staff, and the load that we're already putting on them for July is extreme. And so just in terms of being able to keep our staff being able to manage the current load of meetings, this is I don't really feel this is tenable, and I just needed to flag that.
So if council wanted to discuss this motion or a motion, would you suggest, Mr. Johnston, that this is something that is discussed and we try and look at scheduling after this meeting? Because
I think if council is determined to proceed with additional CCRC meetings, I think we need to defer public hearings or other council meetings because we just don't have the staff resources to accommodate it.
Okay. I see Councillor Boyle on the queue. Councillor Boyle, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Councillor Boyle. Are you on the queue? Councillor Boyle?
Councillor Boyle had to leave at 3.
That's what I had thought, but I had cleared all the queues, and I had Councillor Boyle on the queue. So my apologies for that. Councillor Carr, are you on the queue?
I wasn't on this queue, so I'm not quite sure which queue that is. But of course, the comments being made by the city manager warrant a response, and that it was in different information that I had received earlier on about developing the schedule. So it does come at somewhat as a surprise and difficult for me to make a last-minute decision about how to change the schedule. Already the schedule of topics and speakers has been approved by us in the first motion. And now we're that motion does include the 2 meeting dates. So anything that is done now that is different from my intention to put forward a motion to add 2 meeting dates would be inconsistent with the motion we just passed. So, and I realize we have 7 minutes left in our meeting.
Councillor Carr, yes, in just a moment, Mr. Johnston, might I suggest, Councillor Carr, you had passed a list of speakers, and you said, that my understanding when you spoke to that was if they were available and things would be moved around, maybe some people are not available. So I don't think that we would need to. I'd ask the clerk to please let me know if we need to deal with that imminently. But perhaps this is a matter that We do have another CCRC meeting. This isn't the last one, so maybe there's a way to move forward with this and make a decision at the next meeting. I was just going to suggest that.
My suggestion actually is that I don't put forward the motion about adding 2 meeting dates at this point, and that the working group that this council committee as a whole has already established, that would be the 5 members who are listed under this topic on the agenda, that we reconvene and that we discuss the meeting dates and then come back to our next. We have the next one, and we have some topics and speakers for that that are clear there. But that this working group reconvene to come forward back to council at the next meeting with suggested dates.
So are you looking to withdraw your motion, Councillor?
Yeah, I actually hadn't put it on the floor yet, so I'm not going to put it on the floor.
Okay. All right.
I sent it around. But
yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much. And hey, Councillor Carr, can I get a motion for you to extend to complete the business of the meeting? We're very close here, but we're 5 minutes to 4.
Yes, if I could move to complete the business of the of this meeting.
Thank you very much. Of the agenda. Do you have a seconder for that?
Kirby Young.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby Young. All in favor, say yay.
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 Yay. Any opposed, say nay. Okay, passes unanimously. Thanks very much, Council. I understand that the CCRC liaisons will take that away, and that we did receive an update from them. Very much appreciate that from both Councillor Carr and Councillor Dominato. And on to item 3 of our agenda, urgent business. I'm going to make sure I clear the queue here, Council. Again, cleared all of the queues now. So does any member of the committee have urgent business? Okay. Seeing no one on the queue, I would suggest that we would need a motion to rise from the committee of the whole. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carr. Seconder?
Councillor Kirby Young.
Thanks, Councillor Kirby Young. And all in favor, say yay,
Aye.
please.
Yay.
Aye.
Yay.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, and the motion carries. And now, Council, I'll need a motion to adopt report of the Committee of the Whole. Do I have a mover?
Yes, so move, Councillor Carr.
Thanks so much. And a seconder?
Councillor Weeb.
Thanks, Councillor Weeb. All in favor, say yay.
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 Yay. Any opposed, say nay. And the motion carries unanimously. And Council, now I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. I saw Councillor Hardwick on there too.
I was on there, but Councillor Carr beat me to it.
You want to second that, Councillor Hardwick?
Happy to do so.
Okay, all in favor, please say yay.
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 Any opposed? Nay? Okay, that passes unanimously as well. We're adjourned. Thanks very much, Council.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website at www.webex.com.